Chapter 2882. This battle was exceptionally intense. It lasted for a full 15 minutes before it finally came to an end. Although the difference in numbers between the two sides was huge. 4 people against 102 people, it was like throwing an egg against a rock. There was no chance of winning. At least, that was what Yuan Chenkong and the others thought. But the final result was beyond everyone's expectations. Ji Tianxing and the other 3 had won a complete victory. The close to 100 guards of the city lord's mansion were all killed. All of them were smashed to pieces, and their godheads were also shattered. Of course, Bai Long, Ji Ku, and Yun Yaro contributed to this. But most importantly, it was the invincible power of the heaven-destroying sword formation. Under the suppression of the sword formation, the guards' movements were sluggish, and their combat strength was greatly reduced. Tens of thousands of giant swords shuttled back and forth, cutting them into pieces. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Bai Long, Yun Yaro, and the others only assisted from the side. When they saw some guards who were lucky enough to survive, they went up and stabbed them twice with their spears, ending their lives. When the guards of the city lord's mansion were all dead, Yuan Chenkong and Yang Zong became generals without an army. Yang Zong was still fine. His strength was already at the 5th level of the Divine Lord realm, and he was in peak condition. He transformed into a dozen grey shadows and attacked Ji Tianxing and the others like ghosts. He executed all kinds of exquisite divine abilities and secret assassination techniques to perfection. Ji Tianxing even felt that Yang Zong's true strength was probably stronger than Yuan Chenkong's. So, he faced Yang Zong alone and fought him. Yang Zong used all his strength and attacked Ji Tianxing without holding back. But Ji Tianxing's divine power was more vigorous, and he had mastered more nomological powers and divine abilities. The two figures flickered between heaven and earth, teleporting left and right, dodging and attacking. It was difficult to determine the winner in a short time. Until 100 breaths later, Yang Zong had used all his trump cards. He felt like he had exhausted all his abilities, and the momentum of his attacks weakened. At this time, Ji Tianxing was still using all kinds of strange techniques, and his attacks became more and more powerful. So, he gradually gained the upper hand and suppressed Yang Zong, making it difficult for him to parry or dodge. As time passed, Yang Zong's divine power was quickly drained away. He started to bleed profusely, and his situation became more and more dangerous. At this time, Yuan Chenkong was in an extremely sorry state. Not only was his hair disheveled and his body covered in blood, there were also numerous wounds on his body. The bloody hole between his chest and abdomen could no longer suppress the injury, and blood continued to spurt out. Under such circumstances, he should immediately leave the battle and find a place to heal his injuries while preserving his divine body. However, White Dragon, Yun Yaro, and Ji Ku were attacking him with all their might, making it impossible for him to escape. Although the 3 of them were only at the 4th to 6th level of the Heavenly God stage, their strength was still at the 4th level of the Heavenly God stage. However, they were extraordinarily talented. Their true battle prowess was comparable to an 8th or 9th level celestial god. As for Yuan Chenkong, although he had 5th level Divine Lord realm strength, he had his strength suppressed by the heaven-exterminating sword formation, restricting his movements. At the same time, he was severely wounded. His divine body was on the verge of collapse. His fighting prowess was extremely weak. The 4 of them were locked in a fierce battle, and no one could do anything to the other. Yun Yaro and Ji Ku were not in a hurry. They were happy to stall for time. However, Yuan Chenkong did not dare to waste any time. His heart was burning with anxiety as he attacked with all his might. However, it was useless. Yun Yaro and Ji Ku's battle experience was not inferior to his. Naturally, they were entangled in a battle of attrition. How could they let him have his way? In the blink of an eye, another 100 breaths passed. Yuan Chenkong could feel that the vitality of his divine body was rapidly disappearing, and it was about to disintegrate. He was so anxious that he was about to go crazy. Damn bastards, you forced me to do this. Yuan Chenkong's eyes were bloodshot. His body was burning with crimson flames as he roared at the top of his lungs. In the battle just now, he had used many defensive divine artifacts and talismans. He had used up all his life-saving trump cards. He could only use his last divine artifact to save his life and escape. Swoosh! A crimson divine whip that was more than 10 feet long appeared in front of him. He activated the divine blood in his body and poured it into the divine whip. Boom! Suddenly, the crimson divine whip expanded to 100 feet long, burning with divine flames that soared into the sky. Terrifying waves of fire and high temperature spread in all directions, dispersing the divine light in the sky. This flaming divine whip was like a majestic fire dragon. Without a doubt. This was a middle-grade monarch divine artifact, a priceless treasure. Its grade was superb and its power was terrifying. Yuan Chenkong was confident that with this flaming divine whip, he could break through Ji Tianxing's sword array and escape from Black Shark Island. Unfortunately, every time he activated this divine whip, he had to consume a large amount of divine blood and essence. Yuan Chenkong's severely injured body immediately turned into a shriveled corpse. His appearance was hideous. Even if he could escape from Black Shark Island, he would suffer heavy losses. He would need to recuperate for at least a few decades to recover. However, in order to escape, he did not care about that. Swoosh! With a flash of light, Yuan Chenkong entered the flaming divine whip and flew toward the 5-colored light shield not far away. The 5-colored giant swords covered the sky and the earth, bombarding the flaming divine whip. Bam! 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 In the blink of an eye, the flaming divine whip was hit by dozens of swords, producing deafening sounds. However, the divine whip remained unscathed despite the flames flying everywhere. Under Yuan Chenkong's control, the flaming divine whip twisted its body like a fire dragon, avoiding the countless giant swords and flying toward the edge of the sword array. 50 miles, 40 miles, 30 miles. Suddenly, Yun Yarrow, Ji Ku, and Bai Long caught up. The three of them shouted coldly and waved their divine spears and swords to intercept the flaming divine whip. "You are courting death." Yuan Chenkong's angry roar came from the flaming divine whip. At the same time, the flaming divine whip used divine dragon swings its tail. Divine flames shot up into the sky and swept toward the three of them. Bam! 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 A series of muffled sounds rang out. The three of them had their divine powers and secret techniques shattered. They were also hit by the flaming divine whip and flew backward while vomiting blood. There were no more obstacles in front of them. The flaming divine whip sped up. When it was 10 miles away from the 5-colored light shield, the flaming divine whip straightened and stabbed forward like a flaming divine sword. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, shaking the heavens and the earth. A few cracks appeared on the 5-colored light shield. It shook violently and flashed with divine light. The powerful rebounding force also sent the flaming divine whip flying back. After flying backward for 30 miles, Yuan Chenkong regained his composure and rushed toward the 5-colored light shield again. He was confident that he could break through the light shield and escape from Black Shark Island. But at this moment, a white-robed figure suddenly appeared from the side. He held a pitch-black divine sword with both hands and slashed out a dazzling golden sword. World slash! The 1,000-foot-long divine golden sword struck the flaming divine whip with a mysterious and terrifying power. Yuan Chenkong had no time to dodge. He didn't even see the person who attacked and the mysteries of the golden sword. In the next moment, the 1,000-foot-long flaming divine whip was sent flying and smashed into the ruins 100 miles away. The raging divine flames were extinguished. The flaming divine whip returned to its original state and fell into the ruins. Yuan Chenkong, who looked like a mummy, also fell to the ground and twitched in pain. Chapter 2883. World slash. It was the most powerful attack formed by the mysterious and powerful power of the world. This was the first time Ji Tianxing had used it since he came to the divine realm. The effect was extraordinary. Yuan Chenkong's divine body lost its vitality on the spot. He was deader than dead. A gust of wind blew, and the shriveled corpse quickly turned into black ashes. Swoosh! A dark red diamond-shaped crystal flew out of the black ash. It was his godhead. Upon closer inspection, one would find that there were a few cracks on its surface. It was obviously injured. Yuan Chenkong's godhead was damaged, and his power was weakened. His godhead flew into the sky, and he could see the situation inside the sword formation clearly. The battle was about to end. Yang Zong, who was the most powerful, had his divine body destroyed by Ji Tianxing. His godhead was also severely injured, and he was fleeing blindly in the sky. Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry to kill him. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Yuan Chengkong's godhead. Anyway, with the heaven-destroying sword formation sealing Black Shark Island, Yang Zong's godhead would not be able to escape. Such a scene made Yuan Chengkong lose all hope. It was as if he had seen death approaching. He was filled with grief and anger. He shouted angrily, "Tianxing, do you really want to kill me? Don't forget, I am a viscount bestowed by the king, the hereditary Qingshan city lord. If you dare to kill me, you will be going against the king. Also, I am the nephew of Princess Tianfeng. Can you bear the wrath of Princess Tianfeng?" Princess Tianfeng was the lord of Tianfeng City. She was also one of the only 20 princesses in the divine nation. She had great power. Not only was he an earl, but he was also a high-level divine lord. This was Yuan Chengkong's biggest backer. As he neared death, Yuan Chengkong's last hope was his identity and backing. He only hoped that Ji Tianxing was not crazy and could still be rational enough to consider the consequences. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "No wonder you can be the lord of Qingshan City. You have such a backer." Yuan Chengkong immediately saw a glimmer of hope. He hurriedly said, "Consecrator Tianxing, you can't go too far. You have to leave some leeway for yourself. As long as you let me and Yang Zong go, everything that happened before will be written off. I promise I won't do anything to you again. How about it?" If it were someone else, they might have hesitated and considered Yuan Chengkong's conditions. After all, Ji Tianxing had long since offended the Bloodsword sect. If he offended Princess Tianfeng on top of that, he would be accused of assassinating a noble of the theocracy. Unless he escaped from the Bloodflame divine country and became a fugitive. Unfortunately, Yuan Chengkong was facing Ji Tianxing. A person who hated being threatened, who was not afraid of being besieged, and who would not feel pity. "Before you asked the Black Mermaid King to assassinate me, if you were this remorseful, I might have considered it. But now, it's too late," Ji Tianxing said indifferently. Yuan Chengkong's godhead froze for a second, then he roared furiously, "You lowly beast! Lowly worm! Aren't you afraid of retribution for being so cruel? If you force me into a corner, I will self-detonate and die with you." Indeed. Self-detonation was the last line of defense for one's dignity. It was the last trump card to kill one's enemy. Yuan Chengkong was forced to self-detonate, and he was already at his wit's end. Hearing the word self-detonate, Yang Zong's godhead trembled. The Black Mermaid King, the priest, and the protector's expressions changed drastically, and fear appeared in their eyes. However, Ji Tianxing's expression did not change, and he sneered coldly, "In my sword array, your life and death are in my hands. Even if you self-detonate, it's useless. If you don't believe me, you can try." His casual words contained unquestionable confidence and domineering aura. Yuan Chengkong was almost choked to death, and he roared furiously, "Ha ha ha! I have never seen someone like you who is not afraid of death. Good. Since you don't want to give me a way out, then let's die together." The tone of his laughter was very arrogant, but behind it was the despair and desolation of a dead heart. Yuan Chengkong did not hesitate anymore, and he immediately self-detonated. The dark red godhead emitted a fiery light that soared into the sky. A destructive aura rapidly brewed in the godhead, repeatedly compressing and expanding. In 2 breaths' time, Yuan Chengkong's godhead would self-detonate. At that time, not only would the sword array be destroyed, but the entire Black Mermaid Island would also be destroyed. Even the sea within a radius of 10,000 miles would be destroyed. Instantly, countless people's hearts clenched. Yang Zong was extremely anxious, and he screamed at the top of his lungs, "No! City Lord, stop!" Outside the array, the Black Mermaid King, the Protector, and the priest's expressions changed drastically. The 3 of them panicked, and they flew away as fast as they could, ordering the Black Mermaid warriors to escape. "It's over. My Black Mermaid Island is destroyed. Get out of the way. What are you waiting for? Run!" There was only one thought in everyone's mind. And that was to escape. The further they ran, the better. However, only a few people were the exception. Ji Tianxing, Bai Long, Yun Yarrow, and Ji Ku were still standing above the ruins, and they had no intention of running away. Looking at Yuan Chengkong's godhead, Ji Tianxing said calmly, "Your life is in my hands. You want to self-detonate? No way." As he spoke, he manipulated the power of the heaven-destroying sword array to suppress Yuan Chengkong. Instantly, the burning flames of the godhead were suppressed by 50%. It was even more difficult for Yuan Chengkong to self-detonate, and the time required to do so was doubled. He desperately resisted the pressure of the sword array, and he tried to self-detonate. However, Ji Tianxing took a step forward and teleported in front of him. "Keep!" Ji Tianxing shouted coldly. He suddenly stretched out his right hand and grabbed Yuan Chengkong's godhead. A pitch-black vortex appeared in his palm, and it instantly swallowed the godhead. Yuan Chengkong's godhead was in an inflated state, and it was extremely dangerous and could explode at any time. However, the energy contained in the godhead had to be compressed and inflated to the limit before it could explode with its strongest power. Unfortunately, Yuan Chengkong's godhead was mercilessly swallowed by the pitch-black vortex. The violent energy that he had spent so much effort to control was swallowed by the black vortex like a flood that had broken through a dam. The energy was quickly draining away, and it could not reach its peak. How could it explode? Naturally, Yuan Chengkong's self-detonation stopped abruptly. The godhead rolled violently in the vortex, and it shot out hundreds of five-colored rays of light, burning with divine flames. The heaven-mending orb crazily swallowed his energy. After purifying it, it transferred half of the energy to Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing's body lit up with five-colored divine light, and his aura rose rapidly. The surrounding sky also vibrated, and the force field became very unstable. Everyone knew that this was the sign of a rapid increase in power. Yun Yarrow, Ji Ku, and Bai Long all looked expectant. Yang Zong, who was not far away, was angry and fearful. His godhead was trembling. He did not know what was going on. However, he knew that Yuan Chengkong's self-detonation had been stopped. Moreover, if he fell into Ji Tianxing's hands, he would definitely die. A new month, please vote. Thank you. End of chapter. Chapter 2884. Yang Zong panicked. He knew that Yuan Chengkong was finished. Defeat Ji Tianxing and save Yuan Chengkong? This thought had once flashed through his mind. But he immediately rejected it. What a joke. He was already severely injured and on the verge of death. He only had a cracked godhead left. How could he fight Ji Tianxing? The most important thing now was to escape from this sword formation. After all, Ji Tianxing was glowing with divine light, and his aura was rising rapidly. He seemed to be dealing with Yuan Chengkong's godhead, or he seemed to be cultivating some secret technique to increase his strength quickly. In short, Ji Tianxing couldn't care less about him now. This was a great opportunity. Whoosh! Yang Zong's godhead flew across the sky and rushed toward the northwest corner of Black Shark Island. He had observed it before. The southern part of the sword formation was more powerful and defensive. The northern part was weaker. Especially the northwest corner, which was the weakest point of the formation. Success or failure depends on this. In the blink of an eye, Yang Zong's godhead flew to the northwest corner and was only 10 miles away from the five-colored light barrier. At this moment, he controlled Yuan Chengkong's two golden swords with his divine telekinesis and attacked the five-colored light barrier with all his might. Kaboom! The two golden swords pierced the five-colored light barrier like shooting stars, creating a deafening sound. Even though the two golden swords were sent flying back and fell into the ruins, they were still in a daze. Two cracks appeared on the five-colored light barrier and it trembled violently. The two cracks were only as thick as a strand of hair. Ordinary people couldn't pass through them. Yang Zong saw hope. His godhead ignited with crimson flames and turned into a crimson mist. Swoosh! The mist scattered into thousands of wisps and flew toward the two cracks. According to my estimation, these two cracks will heal in 3 breaths. 3 breaths is enough for me to escape from the sword formation. This thought flashed through Yang Zong's mind, and he was a little excited. Whoosh! Whoosh! Wisps of dark red mist passed through the two cracks and escaped from the heaven-destroying sword formation. In just one breath, hundreds of wisps of mist escaped from the sword formation. Yang Zong was overjoyed. He controlled the remaining 600 wisps of mist and sped them through the cracks. But at this moment, a mocking sneer suddenly came from behind him. The city lord is already dead. As a butler, how can you not be buried with him? It was Ji Tianqing's voice. Yang Zong felt as if he had been struck by lightning. After a moment of hesitation, he sped up without regard for anything else and entered the two cracks. However, Ji Tianqing sneered and pressed his hand down. The two cracks on the 5-colored light wall instantly healed. More than 100 strands of red mist were outside the formation, while more than 500 strands of red mist were inside the formation. There were also over 100 strands of red mist that were stuck in the 5-colored light barrier. Yang Zong was dumbfounded on the spot. It's actually KAKA stuck. Caught between a rock and a hard place, it was extremely awkward. Ji Tianqing looked at the red mist with a smile and slowly extended his left hand. A pitch-black vortex appeared in his palm, emitting a terrifying devouring power. Shua! The invisible devouring storm enveloped more than 600 streaks of red mist and devoured them in the blink of an eye. Yang Zong was in extreme despair. He could only withdraw his divine ability and return to his original form. With a flash of red light, he turned back into a dark red godhead. However, the godhead's power was even weaker, and there were a few more cracks. Surrounded by the pitch-black vortex, the godhead struggled with all its might, trying to escape. However, the godhead's power leaked out crazily and was mercilessly devoured by the vortex. Not only could Yang Zong not escape, but he also sank deeper and deeper. The more he struggled, the faster his power leaked out. However, if he did not struggle, he would be waiting for his death and be devoured by the vortex bit by bit. In short, he would die either way. At this moment, Yang Zong suddenly understood. It turned out that Ji Tianqing had used this move to forcefully interrupt Yuan Chengkong's self-destruction. It was a heaven-defying and unbelievable divine ability. Thinking of this, Yang Zong's consciousness became weaker and weaker. Soon, he fell into eternal darkness. On the sea 1,000 kilometers away from Black Shark Island, the Black Shark King, Guardian, and Priest were desperately flying high in the sky. Seeing that Yuan Chengkong was about to detonate his godhead, they did not care about anything else and fled together, trying to get as far away from Black Shark Island as possible. In just a few breaths' time, they had already run 1,000 kilometers away. As for the hundreds of Black Shark warriors, they had left them far behind and were desperately running for their lives. At this moment, the Black Shark King sensed that something was wrong. He suddenly stopped and shouted coldly, "Stop! Stop running!" The Guardian and Priest ran for another few dozen kilometers before stopping. They turned to look at the Black Shark King. The Black Shark King did not look at them. He had already turned around and stared at Black Shark Island. There's no need to run. Yuan Chengkong's self-destruction failed. The Black Shark King observed for a moment and concluded. The Guardian and Priest looked at each other and exclaimed in disbelief, could it be that Yuan Chengkong was afraid of death and cancelled his self-destruction midway? That's not right. He was already in such a state. It was impossible for him to cancel it even if he wanted to. The Black Shark King used his divine senses to check the situation on the island and said, no, Yuan Chengkong did not cancel his self-destruction. He was suppressed by that kid. What? How is this possible? The Guardian and Priest were even more shocked. Their mouths were wide open and their expressions were even more interesting. Yuan Chengkong is a 5th-level divine monarch. To be able to forcefully interrupt his self-destruction, it must be a high-level divine monarch. Could it be that kid is a high-level divine monarch? This is impossible. The two of them could not accept this result. The Black Shark King had the same thought. His eyes and expression were filled with shock. It's not just Yuan Chengkong. That housekeeper was also suppressed by that kid. When he said this, the Black Shark King's voice was trembling. Not only was he shocked, but he was also a little flustered. The Guardian and Priest's hearts were in turmoil again. It was as though they were petrified. After a long while, the two of them took in a breath of cold air and exclaimed in disbelief. "My king, you must have seen wrongly. Stopping Yuan Chengkong's self-destruction with one hand and suppressing the housekeeper with the other? That kid actually has such a terrifying technique. Who exactly is he? Even a 7th-level divine monarch would not be able to do that. Yes. He must be an 8th-level divine monarch." The Black Shark King kept silent and his gaze was complicated. After keeping silent for a while, he saw that the guardian and priest had not regained their senses. He then said, "It's no longer important what realm he is in. Anyway, if he wants to kill us and annihilate the Black Shark race, it will be as easy as flipping his palm. Previously, when we ran away, we had already angered him. He must be very disappointed in us. We have to think of a way to salvage the situation." Previously, Yang Zong had advised him not to interfere. He thought that if he did not participate in the battle, Yuan Chengkong would not die and he would not offend the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. Moreover, he could take the Dragon Crocodile Pearl and resources worth 10 billion for himself. It was killing two birds with one stone. However, the situation in front of him was the complete opposite. The Black Shark King was really flustered. Chapter 2885. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, we can't avoid it. The Black Mermaid King was anxious, but he could only accept his fate. After all, the Black Mermaid tribe was here. He couldn't possibly abandon his 20,000 people and escape with the guardians and priests, right? It was not worth it for the 100 poison crocodile dragon pearl and the resources that were worth 10 billion. Therefore, after the Black Mermaid King calmed himself down, he brought everyone back to the Black Mermaid Island. Swoosh. Soon, everyone returned to the Black Mermaid Island. The battle had already ended. Ji Tianxing's sky-vanquishing sword formation had also been removed. The Black Mermaid Island still existed, but it had become a wasteland. The mountains, forests, and palaces on the island had all been leveled. The ground was filled with deep pits and ravines, and small hills of earth and rocks could be seen everywhere. Ji Tianxing was standing in the sky with his palms clasped together and his eyes closed as he circulated his energy. His body was still shining with rainbow divine light and emitting powerful divine power waves. The white dragon was not idle either. He was cleaning up the battlefield. He searched the entire Black Mermaid Island and found a few interspatial rings, a few monarch-grade divine artifacts, and many fragments of godheads. As for Yun Yarrow and Ji Ku, they had already returned to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower to cultivate in seclusion. Their current strength was much weaker than Ji Tianxing's. If they followed Ji Tianxing outside, they would definitely be delayed. Therefore, they focused on cultivating and increasing their strength as soon as possible. They would only show themselves at crucial moments. Ji Tianxing had just returned to the divine realm and had not gained a firm foothold yet. Of course, the wretched development stage was mainly for rapid development. Hundreds of Black Mermaid warriors stopped in the sky 100 miles away and waited quietly. The Black Mermaid King brought the guardians and priests to Ji Tianxing. Seeing that Ji Tianxing still had his eyes closed, the three of them remained silent and waited patiently. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing dealt with Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong's godheads. He would first seal it in the heaven-mending pearl, and then properly refine it when he had the time. Not to mention anything else, just the divine Tao laws condensed within the two godheads were enough for Ji Tianxing to cultivate for a very long time. He finally opened his eyes. Shua! A wisp of sacred golden light flashed through his eyes, as if it was tearing the sky apart. The Black Mermaid King and the other two were the closest. They felt their cheeks tighten as if they had been slashed by a sword light. As such, the three of them lowered their posture even more. Congratulations, young Master Tianxing. You have taken your revenge and killed Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong. From now on, the City Lord's mansion will exist in name only. In the vicinity of Qingshan City, no one will be able to contend with young Master Tianxing. The Black Shark King was all smiles as he cupped his fists at Ji Tianxing to congratulate him. His smile was very sincere and his emotions were very emotional. It was impossible to tell that he had just betrayed Ji Tianxing. The guardian and high priest also followed suit and bowed to Ji Tianxing to congratulate him. Ji Tianxing looked at the Black Shark King expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "Take them out." The Black Shark King was stunned and looked a little awkward. He did not expect Ji Tianxing to not talk nonsense with him and go straight to the point. Of course, he knew what Ji Tianxing was talking about. He wanted to act dumb, but he did not dare to. He wanted to hand over his treasures and resources, but he could not bear to. He was very conflicted. At this moment, the white dragon had finished cleaning up the battlefield and flew back to Ji Tianxing. Seeing the Black Shark King's conflicted face, he said in a mocking tone, "What's wrong, Black Shark King? Constipated?" The Black Shark King smiled embarrassedly and obediently took out a black thumb ring and a jade ring. "Young Master Tianxing, these are the resources and treasures that Yuan Chengkong brought. I have counted them just now. There are a total of 54,000 pearls, 540 million god stones, and 54,000 sets of heaven god equipment. Now, I will return them to you. Please accept them." After he finished speaking, the Black Shark King held the thumb ring and the jade ring and handed it to Ji Tianxing respectfully. Ji Tianxing did not look at the thumb ring and the jade ring. He looked at the Black Shark King indifferently and said, "Not enough." "Ah." The Black Shark King's smile froze. He thought to himself, "This guy is not going to leave me any benefits at all. Too overbearing. After all, I have helped you and even cooperated with you to put on an act." Although he said that, he still took out an interspatial ring and handed it to Ji Tianxing. "Young Master Tianxing, this is the 20% deposit that Yuan Chengkong gave me. It is all in the ring. 2 rings and a thumb ring. A total of 600 million god stones, 60,000 pearls, and 60,000 sets of heaven god equipment. These were all Yuan Chengkong's assets." Ji Tianxing looked at the Black Shark King expressionlessly. His eyes became colder and colder. The Black Shark King felt guilty, but he could only force himself to smile awkwardly. "Young Master Tianxing, everything is here now." Bai Long could not help but shake his head and chuckle. "Fish die for wealth, and birds die for food. Black Shark King, you only have one chance. If you insist on acting dumb, don't blame my master for showing you his culinary skills." The Black Shark King was stunned. He asked confusedly, "What culinary skills?" Bai Long raised his right hand and clenched his 5 fingers. "Slicing fish, deboning fish, steaming, boiling, and braising." After he finished speaking, he looked at the Black Shark King seriously. "How do you want to die?" "Oh no. What kind of flavor do you want?" The Black Shark King understood and could not help but shrink his neck. He felt humiliated and angry. However, he did not dare to act up and could only face reality. He took out the 100 poison crocodile dragon pearl from his interspatial ring and handed it to Ji Tianxing with trembling hands. Only the heavens knew that when he gave away this dragon pearl, his heart was bleeding. He had already put a treasure in his pocket, but now he had to give it away. That feeling was simply, swoosh. Ji Tianxing waved his sleeves and kept the 2 rings, the thumb ring, and the 100 poison crocodile dragon pearl into his interspatial ring. He stared at the Black Shark King with a sharp gaze and said in a dignified tone, "Black Shark King, from today onwards, you are on your own. If you continue to stir up trouble and target the Mystic Light Island and the Qi family, you know the consequences." After saying this, Ji Tianxing turned and left, flying south with Bai Long. The Black Shark King was embarrassed and angry. He gritted his teeth and suppressed his anger as he watched Ji Tianxing leave. After a long while, when Ji Tianxing and Bai Long disappeared into the horizon, the Black Shark King could not help but roar. "Ah, that damned bastard, he really didn't leave any benefits for this prince. Even if I have wronged you, I have helped you so much. How can you not be grateful at all? How dare you threaten me? Don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I will make you regret being born." The guardian and high priest looked at each other with a complicated expression. After the Black Shark King calmed down, the 2 of them started to persuade him. "My king, we can't beat him, and we can't fight him either. Please don't be rash. Yes, more than half of our elite experts and warriors are dead or injured. We might not be able to recover in the next 30 years. Please do not provoke him again. Otherwise, We will all be finished. The Black Shark King turned and glared at the two of them. He roared, "Of course I know. Do I need you to remind me? Can't I vent my frustrations a little?" End of chapter. Chapter 2886. A few hours later, Ji Tianxing and Bai Long returned to Mystic Light Island. When they were still 1,000 miles away from Mystic Light Island, they saw that the island's protective formation was in operation. It was glowing with colorful divine light. The monarch-grade divine formation with a radius of 500 miles was personally set up by Ji Tianxing. Mystic Light Island was in a defensive posture. Not only was the protective formation activated, but there were also many guards patrolling the island. When Ji Tianxing and Bai Long approached, the guards were very alert and immediately sounded the alarm. Swoosh, swoosh. A few moments later, dozens of Qi family guards flew over from all directions, ready for battle. Bai Long was amused when he saw this. He said in a playful tone, "Isn't Qi Huangji putting on a show? Everything is settled. Why is he still putting on an act?" Ji Tianxing chuckled. "Maybe it's to make it more realistic so that the news won't be leaked. If I'm not wrong, the Qi family's core members probably haven't come up with a plan yet." His tone was mocking and full of sarcasm. Bai Long nodded. "Later, I'll have a good talk with Qi Huangji about this. It's time for him to clean up the spies in his family." At this moment, Ji Tianxing casually shot out a ray of divine light and activated the island's protective formation. He brought Bai Long through the light screen and flew into Mystic Light Island. Dozens of guards of the Qi family held swords and sabers as they rushed over murderously. When the captain of the guards saw Ji Tianxing's face clearly, he immediately stopped his charge and shouted loudly, "Don't worry, Ji Tianxing. Stop. Stop. It's one of us. Reverend Tianxing is back." The dozens of guards of the Qi family were all stunned on the spot with strange expressions on their faces, revealing astonished expressions. Everyone stared at Ji Tianxing and muttered, "This is really Reverend Tianxing? Wasn't Reverend Tianxing injured by the Black Mermaid King and captured to the Black Mermaid tribe?" "That's right. Revered Elder Tianxing is being held captive in the Black Mermaid tribe. He's still waiting for young master to save him." Consecrated Tianxing actually came back unscathed. What's going on? Many of the guards were a little confused, unable to make sense of the situation. They were filled with shock and doubt, but their status was too low, so they didn't dare to stop Ji Tianxing and ask him about it. Sure. While everyone was still in a daze, Ji Tianxing flew over their heads and headed straight for the profound light cave in the middle of the island. Arriving above the profound light cave, he released his divine sense and spread it out. Soon, he discovered it with his divine sense. Near the entrance of the mine, there was a magnificent palace. Qi Huangji, 2 deacons, and more than 30 core members of the Qi family were still discussing countermeasures in the great meeting hall. At this moment, Qi Huangji looked both mentally and physically exhausted. He was so anxious that his eyes were red. His attitude was resolute. He expressed that he would go bankrupt and gather 10 billion worth of wealth to rescue Ji Tianxing from the Black Mermaid tribe. The 2 deacons couldn't dissuade him. They stood silently in the great meeting hall, looking down. The 30 or so core members of the Qi family, however, were discussing animatedly. Each of them had their own opinions. It was very lively. Qi Huangji looked very helpless and dispirited. He slumped on the throne at the head of the table, rubbing his forehead as if he was anxious. In reality, he was very calm on the inside. He was even secretly sneering. "It's been 2 whole days. I've discussed with you 12 times. Every time, you found all kinds of reasons and excuses to stop me from rescuing Brother Tianxing. Perhaps, seeing my helpless, anxious, and helpless appearance, you feel very satisfied in your hearts, and even despise me, right? Ha ha ha. I remember it all. I'll settle accounts with those who were the happiest soon." Previously, Ji Tianxing had sent him a message and asked him to cooperate with him to put on a show. He had fooled everyone. His acting was very realistic and on point. During this time, he looked anxious and worried on the surface, but in reality, he was secretly observing the 30 or so core members. He knew who was harboring what intentions and who was disloyal. He even knew who could be spies from other factions. Now, he only hoped that Ji Tianxing would return soon. Once this show was over, he would clean up the house. The core members had been arguing and discussing for an hour, and there was no sign of them stopping. Qi Huangji was frustrated and stood up. With a dark face, he shouted angrily, "A bunch of trash. After so long, you still can't come up with a solution. How dare you make a fuss here? Get out of here, all of you. Don't you need to work in the mines and workshops?" Qi Huangji scolded everyone. Many of the core members shrunk their necks and stared at the ground in silence. The two deacons also came out to smooth things over. They waved their hands and said, "All right, today's meeting is over. Everyone, go back to work." Many of the core members were relieved. After bowing, they turned and left the great meeting hall. However, a few core members seemed to be unhappy. They looked down on Qi Huangji in their hearts, but they were scolded in public. How could they endure it? A burly middle-aged steward said with a fake smile, "Young master, no matter how important consecrator Tianxing is, he can't compare to the family's assets of 10 billion yuan. If he was really so powerful, why would he be captured by the Black Mermaid King and unable to escape? Moreover, the Qi family's ancestors worked hard for 1,000 years to accumulate the family's assets today. You are still too young and impulsive. How can you ruin the family's foundation for a consecrator? You should report such a big matter to the family head and let him decide." On the surface, this person was persuading Qi Huangji for the sake of the Qi family's foundation. However, his tone was arrogant and unruly, and he was very impudent to Qi Huangji. The meaning of his words was that what was the big deal about a consecrator dying? The Qi family had 10 billion yuan, so they could find another one in the future. Qi Huangji was a useless piece of trash and didn't have the ability to deal with this matter. "Don't make a fuss. Go find your father and let him decide." Qi Huangji was immediately enraged. He glared at the middle-aged steward and shouted angrily, "Qin Feng, how dare you insult this young master?" The middle-aged steward named Qin Feng said with a smile, "Young master, please calm down. I am also thinking of the Qi family's foundation. I am just speaking the truth. How is that an insult?" The other four stewards also nodded in agreement and tried to persuade him. "Young master, please calm down. Steward Qin is also working hard for the family and exhausting his mind. That's right. Steward Qin can't bear to see you unable to sleep and eat well, so he helped you come up with a plan. He has good intentions. Steward Qin is not the only one who cares about the family. All of us are the same. We can't bear to see you make a mistake and cause a disaster. Young master, please calm down and think about it carefully." Seeing this scene, Qi Huangji pointed at them and laughed in anger. "Good. Very good. Your wings have hardened, right?" The two stewards also felt that the 5 stewards were acting strangely, so they scolded, "The 5 of you, why aren't you apologizing to the young master? As servants, how can you be qualified to comment on the young master's right and wrong? Why aren't you apologizing and getting out of the hall?" The 5 stewards naturally refused to apologize. They were unconvinced and wanted to argue a little more. At this moment, a white figure appeared out of thin air in the hall and stepped on Steward Qin's head. End of chapter. Chapter 2887. "Die, you little clown." A cold and majestic roar suddenly exploded in the main hall. What followed was a supreme divine power that suppressed the heavens and the earth, invisibly sealing the entire main hall. Bam! There was a muffled explosion. Before Steward Qin could react, he was stepped on by the white figure and fell to the ground with a plop. His head instantly exploded like a watermelon that fell from a high place. Pieces of flesh and blood splattered all over the faces of the surrounding 4 people. The thick smell of blood immediately spread in the main hall. The sudden turn of events left everyone dumbstruck. There was dead silence in the main hall. One could hear a pin drop. Those standing in the main hall, those who had not left in time, and those beside Steward Qin all stared at the white figure with their mouths agape. When they saw the newcomer's face clearly, everyone was filled with shock. Their eyes were filled with fear and astonishment. The 2 deacons were also stunned. Their eyes were wide open, and they looked as if they had seen a ghost. Only Qi Huangji, who was at the head of the table, was stunned for a moment before regaining his senses. He stared at the white-robed youth with burning eyes and revealed a look of surprise. He laughed loudly and said, "Ha ha ha. Brother Tianxing, you're finally back. You're just in time." There was no doubt. The white-robed youth who appeared out of thin air and stepped on Steward Qin was Ji Tianxing. Qi Huangji's loud laughter awakened everyone in the main hall. The two deacons and the many backbones only then regained their senses and immediately burst into a series of exclamations. "Oh my God! It's actually revered Elder Tianxing. Isn't he, imprisoned in the Black Mermaid tribe?" Revered Elder Tianxing was clearly injured by the Black Mermaid King and was even imprisoned. How is it possible? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? He actually came back unscathed. Who can tell me what's going on? At this moment, everyone felt that their brains had short-circuited and were completely unable to comprehend the situation. No matter how astute a person was, he was still dumbfounded and confused. This was too strange. Only Qi Huangji knew the inside story and was in an extremely good mood. He flew towards Ji Tianxing and opened his arms as if he wanted to hug him. However, just as he pounced in front of Ji Tianxing, the white dragon appeared. "Hey, young master, please control yourself." As he spoke, Bai Long grabbed Qi Huangji. Unable to move, Qi Huangji asked in confusion, "White dragon, why haven't I heard of this before? Did you make it up yourself?" "That's not important." Bai Long waved his hand and pointed at Steward Qin's corpse. "Let's clean up the house first." Meanwhile, a divine deity covered in cracks flew out from Steward Qin's corpse and fled to the entrance of the main hall as fast as lightning. With a wave of his sleeve, Ji Tianxing grabbed the godhead and held it in his hand. No matter how hard Steward Qin struggled, he was unable to move. Ji Tianxing looked sharply at the other four stewards and said in a dignified tone, "Who are you? Why did he sneak into the Qi clan? What schemes did he have? Tell me the truth." The four stewards were enveloped by his divine aura and immediately trembled in fear. Their legs gave way and they knelt on the ground. "Master, please spare my life. This lowly one knows his mistake. Master, this lowly one has been wronged. Master, please forgive this lowly one. This lowly one knows his mistake and will definitely turn over a new leaf." The four stewards, who had been arrogant just a moment ago, were now like stray dogs, terrified and uneasy. The four of them knelt on the ground and begged for mercy or cried out their grievances. There was nothing they could do. The master in front of them was too valiant and ruthless. They dared to fool and mock Qi Huangji, but they did not dare to play tricks in front of Ji Tianxing. After all, this master killed people like killing chickens and did not ask whether they were right or wrong. Who dared to be arrogant? Who dared to talk back? I guarantee that you will lie down on the ground and be beheaded. Seeing this scene, Qi Huangji chuckled, feeling extremely satisfied. "Ha ha! Weren't the four of you arrogant dogs pointing fingers at me just now?" Qi Huangji walked in front of the four stewards and sneered arrogantly. "Master Tianxing is so wise and powerful. How could he be captured by the Black Mermaid King? Do you think that I've lost my mind and accomplished nothing without the help of consecrator Tianxing? Ha ha ha! This is the scheme of Master Tianxing and I. We worked together to put on a show. I just played a little trick, and all of you revealed your true colors. You want to fight with me with just this bit of ability? Naive." Qi Huangji's words instantly caused an uproar in the main hall. The two stewards and the many backbones were enlightened. Everyone was shocked and exclaimed in disbelief. They started to whisper to each other. "Oh my God! So this matter was young master's scheme from the beginning? Too amazing. Young master actually deceived everyone. We all believed him. In that case, not only were we deceived, but the Yuan City Lord was also fooled. What an exciting show. Young master's strategy and methods have already surpassed his master. Master Tianxing is so powerful. Young master is wise and unparalleled in his schemes." Looking at everyone's shocked expressions and listening to their exclamations and praises, Qi Huangji was overjoyed. He felt as if he was floating. "You are really short-sighted. Do you really think that I am a useless person? I used to hide my abilities and deliberately pretended to be a useless person. I only revealed my intelligence and wisdom at the crucial moment and amazed the world. Which of the young masters of the major families in Green Mountain City can be compared to me? I am the smartest. Qi Huangji improvised and talked non-stop, blowing his own trumpet. Bai Long could not stand it anymore. He secretly tugged at Qi Huangji's sleeve and sent a voice transmission. Ahem. You should take it easy. Don't brag too much. Otherwise, you will be exposed. Qi Huangji blinked at him and sent a voice transmission. This is the best opportunity for me to establish my prestige and change everyone's opinion. If I miss this opportunity, it will be very difficult in the future. Aren't I very smart? Bai Long nodded and said with a strange smile, Yes, you are too wise. Qi Huangji looked at him suspiciously and muttered, Why do I feel like you are scolding me? At this moment, Ji Tianxing interrupted their conversation. Huangji, I will leave these 4 stewards to you. No matter what method you use, find out everything about them. Qi Huangji quickly nodded and ordered the 2 deacons, tie these 4 bastards up and throw them into the underground prison. I will interrogate them personally. The 2 deacons tied up the 4 stewards and sealed their divine powers and divine senses. They were about to bring them down. Ji Tianxing waved the divinity in his hand and said to the 4 stewards, Qin Feng's divinity is here. As long as I search his divine soul and memory, all your secrets will be exposed. So, if you confess your crimes honestly, you will suffer less. Chapter 2888. There was no need for Ji Tianxing to deal with such a trivial matter. He believed that Qi Huangji already knew the answer and would be able to solve it soon. After leaving the meeting hall, he entered a secret chamber alone and prepared to cultivate. White Dragon stayed by Qi Huangji's side to help him plan and interrogate him. After all, White Dragon was the best at torture. In a dark secret chamber, the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower floated in the air. Ji Tianxing entered the 6th floor of the tower and cultivated in the distorted space-time. He made hand seals and secretly activated the heaven-mending orb. Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong's godheads were sealed in the heaven-mending orb. Although 30% of their divine power had been devoured, their divine souls, memories, and laws still existed. Ji Tianxing decided to devour Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong's divine souls and memories first. Yuan Chengkong was dead, and the City Lord's mansion existed in name only. However, Princess Tianfeng was behind Yuan Chengkong. Ji Tianxing needed to know more secrets so that he could deal with Princess Tianfeng's revenge in the future. In addition, Yang Zong was Yuan Chengkong's confidant and had always been mysterious and low-key. It was necessary to know more about him. As time passed, Ji Tianxing used the soul-searching divine power to quickly absorb the memories in the 2 godheads. Vast amounts of information flowed into his divine soul and he memorized them. Naturally, he also learned many secrets about Yang Zong and Yuan Chengkong. There were many crucial pieces of information. For example, the method to open the City Lord's mansion's treasure vault. There were more than 50 billion worth of resources stored inside. Princess Tianfeng was a 6th-level Divine Lord and was about to break through to the 7th level to become an upper-level Divine Lord. Yang Zong came from the distant Tsongshan Empire and was an abandoned disciple of the Shadow Sect. He betrayed the Shadow Sect and crossed over 1 billion miles to hide in the remote Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. He lived a mysterious and low-key life. The Shadow Sect was one of the top 10 superpowers in the Tsongshan Empire and had a half-step Divine King. In addition, Yang Zong had mastered the 3 ultimate techniques of the Shadow Sect and mastered 3 special divine powers. Half a day later, Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong's divine souls and memories were devoured by Ji Tianxing. He began to refine the 2 godheads, absorbing the god force within them and stripping them of their godheads. What surprised him was that Yuan Chengkong's godhead had actually condensed 27 Dao laws. Yama Zong's godhead had condensed 30 laws. Compared to ordinary middle-level divine lords, these 2 people were considered to have deep foundations and had hopes of advancing to high-level divine lords. Fortunately, they did not grasp a secret technique that overlaps the laws. Otherwise, their combat prowess would be even stronger. It would be very difficult for me to kill the 2 of them. Ji Tianxing secretly rejoiced and started to devour their divine Tao laws. These two people had condensed a total of 57 laws. Excluding the laws that Ji Tianxing already possessed and the duplicate laws, there were still 20 laws left. Ji Tianxing stripped and condensed them one by one. Time passed quickly. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Unknowingly, a month had passed. Ji Tianxing took those 20 laws and refined them into his godhead. Not long ago, he killed Lu Jiuchong and Bloodsword sect's fourth elder. He also killed many Bloodsword sect disciples and Lu family disciples. Those 600 over godhead fragments had long been devoured and refined by him. He had condensed 60 laws in his godhead. Now, adding these 20 laws, the divine Tao laws that he possessed reached as many as 80. This number was very terrifying. Normally, only high-level divine lords could grasp so many laws. At the same time, the two godheads were also completely devoured by the heaven-mending bead. Boundless God force also became Ji Tianxing's strength. He ended cultivation and discovered to his astonishment that he actually broke through the limit and reached first-level divine lord realm. From now on, he was a low-level divine lord. I thought that there would be a bottleneck when breaking through to divine lord, needing to accumulate for a very long time before successfully breaking through. Didn't expect that without any bottlenecks or setbacks, success came naturally just like that. Ji Tianxing muttered a few sentences, feeling deeply gratified. If it were any other celestial deity, they would encounter a bottleneck when breaking through to divine lord realm. At least several hundred years, at most several thousand years of accumulation before being able to smoothly advance. But he was an anomaly. After he reached peak celestial deity, his strength actually strengthened by 99 times. Surveying the world, who else had a deeper foundation than him? Therefore, when he devoured the divine sparks of 2 middle-level divine lords and condensed 60 laws, he naturally broke through. Reaching first-level divine lord realm, he entered a brand new realm. Compared to celestial deity realm, divine lord realm was even more profound and unfathomable, possessing vast magical powers. Every breath, every action contained laws and divine power, being commanded freely. With a raise of the hand, one could control heaven and earth, communicate with the stars beyond the heavens, and control all kinds of divine power. Possessing all kinds of inconceivable divine abilities. The most basic change was that lifespan also reached 200,000 years from 100,000 years. Even though Ji Tianxing successfully broke through to first-level divine lord, he was not in a hurry to leave in a hurry. However, he was not in a hurry to leave the divine pagoda. He still needed to cultivate for a period of time to strengthen his foundation of the divine path. He took out that 100 poison crocodile dragon bead from his spatial ring again and observed it carefully. The fist-sized divine bead gave off a dazzling 5-colored light, releasing mysterious power undulations. Ji Tianxing utilized the divine pupil mystic art and observed carefully. Before long, he saw through the clues. This 100 poison crocodile dragon bead should be the ancient crocodile dragon's dragon bead. To that ancient crocodile dragon, this was an important item second only to the godhead. Inside, not only did it contain the ancient crocodile dragon's powerful divine power, there were also over 100 kinds of horrifying highly toxic poisons. Any kind of highly toxic power could poison and kill deities below the level of High Divine Lord. Of course, the 100 poison crocodile dragon bead could only unleash such power when it was in the ancient crocodile dragon's body at its prime. Now, no idea how many tens of thousands of years had passed. The 100 poison crocodile dragon bead's power was mostly lost. The power of the 100 kinds of highly toxic poisons was also greatly reduced. But even so, Ji Tianxing also believed that those highly toxic poisons could threaten the lives of middle-level divine lords. He learned from Yuan Chenkong's divine soul memories that as early as over 100 years ago, Yuan Chenkong obtained this 100 poison crocodile dragon bead. It was just a pity that Yuan Chenkong could not do anything to those highly toxic poisons and could not refine them. That feeling was like a dog biting a hedgehog, unable to bite down. Yuan Chenkong planned to borrow the power of the crocodile dragon bead when he reached peak 6th level divine lord and assailed 7th level divine lord. But now, it all benefited Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing held the 100 poison crocodile dragon bead in his hand and tried to release divine power to refine it. However, his divine power had just entered the crocodile dragon bead when it was corroded and dissipated by the highly toxic poisons. So much so that those highly toxic poisons even spread out and corroded his divine power and divine body. Ji Tianxing hurriedly withdrew his divine power and muttered to himself, "No wonder Yuan Chenkong is helpless. This highly toxic power is not what he can touch at all. But I don't have to worry." The corners of his mouth curled into a hint of a smile. Urging the power of the heaven-mending pearl, he cast the devouring divine ability and began to devour the crocodile dragon bead. End of this chapter. Chapter 2889. Even though the 100 poisons crocodile dragon pearl contained potent poison, the number was as many as 100 types, the power incomparably terrifying. Only high-ranking divine lords had the qualifications and ability to directly refine it. But to the heaven-mending pearl, these were all just pure power. Going through the heaven-mending pearl's devouring and purification, the 100 types of potent poisons all became docile, merging into Ji Tianxing's body unceasingly. As for the divine power contained in the crocodile dragon pearl, it was devoured by the heaven-mending pearl. Very soon, 5 days' time passed. The 100 poisons crocodile dragon pearl disappeared. The 100 types of potent poisons were all refined by Ji Tianxing. He grasped the 100 poisons and could display and use them smoothly and freely. Fusing them in some divine abilities and mystic arts, it would even have a powerful effect that was unexpected. But he was not satisfied with this. He continued cultivating again, dividing those 100 types of potent poisons into 5 major categories. The first category of potent poisons had berserk power and could instantly take lives. The second category of potent poisons possessed super corrosive power. Regardless of whether it was rocks, steel, or divine weapons and armors, it could all corrode them into ashes. The third category of potent poisons specialized in corroding flesh and blood life. The fourth category of potent poisons targeted the divine soul specifically. As for the fifth category of potent poisons, the attributes were more chaotic. Some were subtle, requiring a very long time before they could manifest power. Some possessed terrifying infectivity, often able to last for several tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, exterminating all life. Ji Tianxing fused the power of these 5 great categories of potent poisons, condensing into one law after another. 3 days later, the berserk potent poison law condensed successfully. 6 days later, the corrosive potent poison law condensed and took form. 9 days later, the blood-transforming potent poison law was mastered. 12 days later, the soul-extinguishing potent poison law was mastered successfully. 15 days later, the last mystic poison law was mastered. At this point, Ji Tianxing grasped 85 kinds of divine Tao laws. Although his strength realm was still first-level divine lord realm, his true combat strength already reached an extremely terrifying level. He revolved his skill and recuperated for another 2 days before ending closed seclusion cultivation and leaving the divine tower. Swoosh! A light flashed. Ji Tianxing returned to the secret chamber. He put away the 9 heavens 10 absolute pagoda, opened the secret chamber's door, and walked out. I was in closed seclusion for 50 days in the divine tower, only 1 day has passed in the outside world. Qi Huangji should have finished cleaning up the household already, right? With this thought in mind, Ji Tianxing walked towards the great council hall. When he entered the meeting hall, he saw a group of Qi family guards escorting 3 stewards out. The 3 stewards were all in ragged clothes and covered in blood. They looked dispirited and weak. Evidently, the 3 of them had all been tortured miserably. In the great council hall, Qi Huangji sat at the head of the table, with the white dragon standing beside him. More than 20 stewards and 2 deacons were standing in the middle of the hall, looking cautious and fearful. The air was still filled with the thick smell of blood. In the middle of the hall, there was a corpse lying on the ground. Fresh blood was flowing out of the corpse. It was obvious that the corpse had just been executed. Seeing Ji Tianxing appear, Qi Huangji nodded slightly and greeted him. "Brother Tianxing, the situation has been investigated. Qi Huangji planned to report the investigation to Ji Tianxing face to face. Ji Tianxing glanced at the people in the hall and waved his hand. You may leave first. You have all seen what happened today with your own eyes. Take this as a warning. In the future, if anyone dares to make the same mistake, they will suffer the same fate. The 2 deacons and 20 stewards nodded in unison. Then, they bowed and left the hall as if relieved of a heavy burden. All along, everyone had thought that Qi Huangji had a good temper. Although he was a bit of a profligate, he was considered gentle and not scheming. But this time, they had witnessed Qi Huangji's shrewdness and methods. In the great council hall, they had witnessed Qi Huangji killing people with a sword and dealing with spies. Everyone's impression of him had been overturned. Only then did they realize that he had a ruthless and decisive side. The hour just now had been very torturous for everyone. Everyone was anxious and uneasy, and their hearts were in turmoil. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing arrived in time and waved his hand to dismiss them. Only then did they feel relieved. Naturally, they left as quickly as possible. After everyone had left, only Ji Tianxing and Bai Long were left in the hall. Qi Huangji then said, Brother Tianxing, with Bai Long's help, I've found out the truth. Qin Feng and Ming Yang were both spies groomed by the City Lord's mansion. They were planted in the Qi mansion 30 years ago. They were the City Lord's mansion's spies and stole a lot of the Qi family's secrets. You've already killed Qin Feng, and I've punished Ming Yang in public as punishment. After today's incident, many of the core members are intimidated and have lingering fears. I believe that for a long time, they won't dare to act rashly. Then, Qi Huangji smiled and cupped his hands in salute. This time, it's all thanks to you that I have the chance to establish my prestige. Ji Tianxing nodded nonchalantly and asked, When I came in just now, I saw the 3 stewards being escorted out. What happened to them? Qi Huangji hurriedly explained, those 3 stewards weren't spies from other factions. It's just that they took bribes and were roped in by Qin Feng and Ming Yang. That's why they wallowed in the mire. Although they didn't know Qin Feng's identity, they didn't betray or plot to destroy the Qi family. But they were blinded by greed and almost committed a grave mistake. I demoted them, punished them with 300 lashes, and sent them to the mine to work for 10 years as punishment. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Speaking of which, they haven't committed a grave mistake, but you punished them so harshly. Aren't you afraid that they'll harbor resentment and revolt or betray the Qi family? Qi Huangji said confidently, I want to use this opportunity to establish my prestige. Of course, I have to punish them severely. They can only blame themselves for not having eyes and bumping into me. They deserve to be punished. Besides, now that the City Lord's mansion has been destroyed, the Qi family is the strongest faction in Qingshan City. No matter how much resentment those 3 fellows have, they won't dare to betray the Qi family. After leaving the Qi family, they're nothing. Who else can they rely on? Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, All right, I'll leave these internal affairs to you. Soon, I might have to leave Qingshan City. From now on, the Qi family's foundation will depend on you to protect it. Hearing this news, Qi Huangji's body trembled and revealed a reluctant expression. It can't be. We've worked so hard for so long and finally achieved a great victory. We're about to usher in our most glorious moment. Aren't you going to stay for a while longer? Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Ji Tianxing said calmly, the City Lord's mansion exists in name only, and the Lu family has become an empty shell. Now, the Qi family is the strongest in Qingshan City, and no other faction can contend against them. If I'm not wrong, Qingshan City will soon fall into the Qi family's control. It looks like the situation is going well. But don't forget, we still have 2 more powerful enemies, Princess Tianfeng and Master Bloodsword. Chapter 2890. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Qi Huangji fell silent. He frowned and asked, I understand, but why do you want to leave Green Mountain City? I know you're not afraid of trouble. Neither would he be afraid of Princess Tianfeng and the Bloodsword sect, abandoning the Qi clan and fleeing alone. If we work together, won't we have a better chance of winning? Ji Tianxing patted him on the shoulder and shook his head with a smile. You can't be blindly optimistic. You have to accept reality. Even if I work with the Qi family, we may not be able to defeat Princess Qianfeng and the Bloodsword sect. Instead, we'll drag the Qi family into a quagmire. Qi Huangji immediately understood his intentions. His heart was filled with shock and gratitude, and his nose felt a little sour. Brother Tianqing, you don't want to implicate the Qi family, so you cut ties with us? But if you leave Green Mountain City, you'll have to face the revenge of Princess Qianfeng and the Bloodsword sect alone. Isn't that very dangerous? How is our Qi family worthy of your protection? Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with an indifferent smile, "All right, don't be so emotional. I'm not as great as you think. If you feel guilty, why don't you take out more treasures to make it up to me?" Qi Huangji was stunned for a moment and smiled bitterly. "Of course, I can make it up to you. Divine beast mounts, divine stones, pills, weapons, and equipment, you can choose whatever you want." Ji Tianqing shook his head. "Forget it, I don't need any of these things. If you really want to repay me, I'll go to Mine 9 to cultivate for 10 days. Then we'll call it even." "That's all?" Qi Huangji was shocked and his eyes widened in disbelief. "No. Absolutely not." He waved his hand and said firmly, "If you want to cultivate in Mine 9, you can do it for as many days as you want. Also, I'll prepare a big gift for you. When you leave Green Mountain City, I'll give it to you." Ji Tianqing didn't refuse and nodded. "All right, that's it then. Also, I have 50,000 pearls and 50,000 sets of heavenly god equipment. Help me deal with them." "What? 50,000 sets of heavenly god equipment?" Qi Huangji's eyes widened. He was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue. "Brother Tianqing, are you kidding me? How can we deal with 50,000 sets of heavenly god equipment? Even a set of low-level heavenly god equipment can be sold for 40,000 divine stones. If it's a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, a set would cost at least 160,000 divine stones. That would be 8 billion, even though the Qi family was the wealthiest. It was nothing compared to the city's mansion, the city. And the Qis, 50,000 heavenly god equipment alone. Equipment was half of the heavenly goddess, was to say, the to make to Tian. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's true. With the Qi family's financial resources, it'll be difficult to deal with this batch of goods. It'll take at least decades. In the whole of Qingshan City, there was no one who could take on this batch of goods." "Huangji, how many to?" A bitter smile appeared on Qi Huangji's face. He deliberated for a moment before extending 2 fingers. 20,000 sets. Bai Long asked. Qi Huangji shook his head. 2,000, and it'll take half a month. Ji Tianqing waved his hand. "Forget it. That's too slow. I'll figure it out myself." Qi Huangji's eyes glowed as he thought of an idea. "Right, if you're in a hurry, you can go to Ning Xiyuan in the Qianxue County. The Nings are one of the wealthiest families in the Qianxue County. They're not only in the pet and pellet business, but also in the equipment business. I think they'll be able to help you in no time." Ji Tianqing nodded. "Okay, I see. Let's talk about it later. If there's nothing else, I'm going to cultivate in the 9th mine. Don't let anyone disturb me. Also, Huangji, keep collecting information about the City Lord Mansion, the Lu family, and the Bloodsword sect. When will your father return to the Qianxue County? When will the Qi family be granted the title by the emperor?" Qi Huangji cupped his hands and said, "Okay, I'll send someone to collect information. You can cultivate in peace." Then, Bai Long followed Ji Tianqing out of the hall and into the Cave of Dark Light. Qi Huangji summoned 2 bodyguards and ordered them to gather information. On the way to the Cave of Dark Light, Bai Long was puzzled. He asked Ji Tianqing through telepathy, "Master, there are only about 2,000 guards and private soldiers in the City Lord's mansion. That old bastard Yuan Chengkong refined 50,000 sets of equipment. What's he up to?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "Divine weapons and equipment can be used to equip soldiers, and can also be used as currency for transactions. The Qianxue County is small, but Yuan Chengkong's backer is Princess Qianfeng. I think he's working for Princess Qianfeng." Bai Long nodded and said, "That's right. There are at least 40 to 50,000 soldiers under Princess Qianfeng's command. Ji Tianxing continued, I've checked Yuan Chungkong's and Yang Zong's space rings. There are tens of billions of god stones, all kinds of elixirs, materials for charms, and rare treasures. In addition to the 6 monarch-level divine weapons, there are many secret books and 40,000 sets of divine realm equipment. Roughly, the value of these resources is more than 30 billion. Bai Long was shocked. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, damn, together with the 50,000 pearls and divine realm equipment, it's worth 40 billion. How can a mere city lord of the Qianxue County be so rich? Back then, when I followed you to the realm of the gods, I only had a few 100 billion. Ji Tianxing said with a smile, when we traveled around, we didn't deliberately accumulate wealth. Naturally, we weren't rich. Moreover, we only lived in the realm of the gods for 500 years. Yuan Chungkong's forces have been accumulating for almost 1,000 years. Moreover, the City Lord Mansion has taken control of the Cave of Darklight and is crazily seizing resources. Bai Long nodded in agreement and reminded him, no matter what, Master, you have to be careful of Princess Qianfeng. I always feel that the City Lord of the Qingshan County is very important to Princess Qianfeng. You killed the City Lord of the Qingshan County, and Princess Qianfeng will not let it go. Ji Tianxing's expression was calm as he dismissed it with a smile. I'll deal with it when the time comes. No matter how strong they are, they're just an army. What's there to be afraid of? While chatting, the master and disciple entered mine number 9. 10 guards of the Qi family were supervising and hundreds of miners were working hard. When they saw Ji Tianxing, they bowed to him. Bai Long ordered everyone to stop working and leave mine number 9. Then, Bai Long stood guard at the entrance of the mine to protect Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing went deep into the mine and sat cross-legged on the divine essence vein. He began to cultivate. Chapter 2891. Ji Tianxing had a premonition. The fall of the City Lord's mansion definitely wouldn't intimidate Princess Qianfeng and the Bloodsword sect. After a short period of peace, they would definitely take revenge even more fiercely. Therefore, he would soon have to leave Azure Mountain City. This was the last time he would devour the divine crystal mine before he left. Whoosh! As he used the Devour Divine ability, the black vortex enveloped the divine crystal mine and endless 7-colored divine power surged into his body. Strands of 7-colored divine power gathered from all directions and weaved into a net in the air. He was like a bottomless pit that wouldn't be filled no matter what. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed by. The vast divine power was purified by the heaven-mending orb and merged into his body. His divine Tao foundation became more and more stable, and his aura became more and more powerful. After reaching the divine Lord realm, every level was 10 times more difficult than the heavenly God realm. In the divine world, most divine lords would need hundreds or even thousands of years of bitter cultivation to reach the next level. But Ji Tianxing was different. The heaven-mending orb and the devour divine ability were terrifying and heaven-defying. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianxing's strength had reached the peak of the first level of the divine Lord realm. His strength had also accumulated to an extremely high level, and his aura was unfathomable. He was just a little bit away from reaching the second level of the divine Lord realm. However, there was a bottleneck that he couldn't smoothly break through. He still lacked an opportunity. There wasn't much point in continuing to devour the divine crystal mine. He was temporarily stuck at the peak of the first level and couldn't advance any further. Moreover, the power of the divine crystal mine had decreased by 60%. Not only was the aura of the mine much weaker, but even the divine crystals in the ores had dimmed. Therefore, Ji Tianxing could only end his cultivation. After opening his eyes, he casually picked up a few ores and crushed them to observe the divine crystals within. Seeing the weak light of the 7-colored divine crystals, he couldn't help but smile awkwardly. I devoured too much this time. Not only did the mine lose a lot of power, but the quality of the divine crystals also decreased by half. I wonder how Qi Huangji and his son will react when they find out about this. Before this, Qi Huangji had vowed that Ji Tianxing could cultivate in mine number 9 for as long as he wanted. Now that he thought about it, Qi Huangji was still too young. Ji Tianxing got up and walked out of the mine. When he was about to reach the entrance of the mine, he saw from afar that the white dragon was squatting in the pit, digging with a face full of concentration. White Dragon dug out one or after another and took out 7 colored divine crystals. He held a few pieces of 7 colored divine crystals in his hands, sizing them up as he shook his head and sighed. Isn't Master too fierce? How many days had it been since he started cultivating? It had almost sucked dry the power of the mineral vein. Look at these divine crystals, all of them look so listless, as if they have kidney deficiency. Sigh. Although he had a look of disdain on his face, he still put the divine crystals into his spatial ring. Ji Tianxing was both annoyed and amused. He asked, White Dragon, what are you doing? The white dragon was awakened. He hurriedly threw away the ore in his hand, pretending that nothing had happened, and flew over with a smile. Master, you're done with your closed-door cultivation? Let's go then. Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and said earnestly, White Dragon, I already have 40 billion worth of resources. This is the first bucket of gold we've dug up since we returned to the divine realm. We don't have to worry about cultivation resources for the next few decades. Moreover, we have the 5 elements world and so many source stones. We don't lack cultivation resources at all. Why do you have to dig out the divine crystals yourself? How many divine crystals can you dig out even if you dig day and night for 10 days like this? The white dragon humbly nodded and said, You're right, Master. Your disciple is stupid. In the past 10 days, your disciple's hands are almost worn out, but I've only dug out tens of thousands of divine crystals. Master, you're powerful enough to plunder 40 billion worth of resources with just a little trick. Your disciple can't compare to you. I'm full of admiration. All right, stop flattering me. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led him out. We should go. Not long after, the master and disciple left the cave of profound light. Qi Huangji had been waiting for a long time. He hurriedly led them into a palace and talked in the study. Brother Tianxing, you're finally out. I've heard a lot of news these days. There are 2 pieces of good news. Do you want to hear them? Qi Huangji was beaming with joy. He was obviously in a good mood. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly. Go ahead. Qi Huangji said with a smile, The first piece of good news is that my father came back 2 days ago. Yesterday morning, the imperial envoy and eunuchs arrived at the Qi residence and announced the decree in public. My father was conferred the title of Viscount of Qingshan. The news has spread, and the whole Qingshan city is talking about it. Our Qi family is famous everywhere and has become a real noble family. Ji Tianxing expected this news, so he wasn't surprised. He nodded and said, What else? Qi Huangji continued, The second piece of good news is that Yuan Chengkong and Yang Zong died on Black Shark Island. The news has spread to the surrounding cities. On the night of the incident, the family members of the city lord's residence quietly fled Qingshan City under the escort of 600 guards. The city lord's residence is now empty, with only a few hundred guards and servants left. The same goes for the Liu family. Many of the servants and guards have been dismissed. The Liu family's widow and family members have packed up their belongings and left Qingshan City for their distant relatives in Tianfeng County. After hearing this news, Bai Long didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, You call this good news? We haven't searched the city lord's residence and the Liu family's treasury. Those people must have taken all the money and treasures with them when they left Qingshan City. That's true. Qi Huangji was startled. He smiled embarrassedly and said, However, Brother Tianxing has 10 billion yuan in wealth and hasn't mentioned it. I'm sure he doesn't care. For us, with the city lord's residence and the Liu family gone, we have 2 fewer opponents. The remaining Feng, Kai, and Yuqi families have been watching from the sidelines. They know very well why the city lord's residence and the Liu family were defeated. Now, the 3 aristocratic families are afraid of us and can't wait to join forces to prevent us from wiping them out. Our Qi family has finally gained a foothold in Qingshan City. Ji Tianxing tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. He pondered for a moment and said, A country can't go a day without a ruler, and a city can't go a day without a ruler. The city lord's residence is only in name now. Someone must step up and take over the position of the city lord to maintain the stability of Qingshan City. Huanji, the imperial envoy hasn't left Qingshan City yet, right? Qi Huanji vaguely guessed something. His eyes lit up and he quickly nodded. He's a guest at my house. He'll leave early tomorrow morning to report back to the imperial city. Ji Tianqing smiled. That's great. Send a message to your father now and ask him to volunteer to take over the position of the city lord. After all, this is for the sake of Qingshan City's stability. End of chapter. Chapter 2892. You want my father to ask the monarch to make him the lord of Qingshan City? Qi Huanji was stunned. He looked at Ji Tianqing in astonishment. Brother Tianqing, is this right? According to the laws of the God Kingdom, the appointment and dismissal of the Lord of Qingshan City must be examined and approved by the commandery princess before being reported to the monarch. Then, the monarch can decide on the appointment and dismissal and issue an edict. My father directly asked the monarch for the appointment through the imperial envoy. This is completely against the rules. This is overstepping. Ji Tianqing looked at him with a half-smile and asked, Do you want your father to be the lord of Qingshan City? Qi Huanji answered without hesitation, Of course. Once my father becomes the lord of Qingshan City, the Qi family's thousand-year foundation will be as stable as a mountain. Not only will the Qi family's status rise, but its power will also grow rapidly. Even the Ning family of Tianxue City will think highly of us. As the young lord of Qingshan City, the difference in status between me and Ning Xiyuan will not be that big. At this point, Qi Huanji suddenly realized that he had inadvertently said what was on his mind, so he quickly shut up. Ji Tianqing asked again, You want your father to be the lord of Qingshan City. Not only will his status be stable, but there will also be many benefits. But do you think the commandery princess of Tianfeng will recommend your father to be the lord of Qingshan City? Qi Huanji quickly shook his head and sneered, Not to mention recommending my father to be the lord of Qingshan City. Even if my father begs him, he will refuse. He might even be thinking about how to get rid of our Qi family. Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. Since you know this, why don't you ask your father to fight for it? Even if your father does this and oversteps the rules, so what? Your father has just been conferred the title of duke. The monarch will not punish him on account of his contributions. Moreover, wealth comes from danger. Ji Tianqing said nothing more. If Qi Huanji and Qi Tianlong did not have the courage, there was nothing he could do. If they missed this opportunity, they could only blame the Qi family for not working hard enough and not having a meteoric rise. Qi Huanji hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly. All right, I'll send a message to my father now. He did not avoid Ji Tianqing and White Dragon, and took out a communication jade slip on the spot, and sent a message to Qi Tianlong. For the past 2 days, the Qi residence had been decorated with lanterns and colored banners, creating a joyous atmosphere. The family head had been conferred the title of Viscount by the monarch, and the entire Qi family was incomparably glorious. In addition, the imperial envoy had arrived and was a guest at the Qi residence. Everyone in the clan was very proud, as if they were superior to everyone else and had become the noblest clan in Green Mountain City. The guards and servants became even more cautious and respectful, not daring to make the slightest mistake. It was evening and the sun was about to set. Qi Tianlong was handling affairs in the study. The housekeeper walked briskly to the door, bowed and reporting to the family head, The banquet has been prepared and can start soon. Do you want to invite the imperial envoy now? Early the next morning, the imperial envoy and the eunuchs would leave Qingshan City and return to the capital to report on their mission. Tonight's banquet was a farewell for the imperial envoy, and it was very grand. Qi Tianlong put down the affairs in his hands and nodded slightly. All right, go and ask the imperial envoy now. I'll be there soon. The housekeeper acknowledged the order and turned to leave. Qi Tianlong prepared to change into a luxurious robe before attending the banquet. But at this moment, a spiritual light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. The spiritual light dissipated, and a communication jade slip appeared. Qi Tianlong was stunned for a moment. He reached out to hold the jade slip and read the contents with his divine sense. A moment later, After reading the contents of the jade slip, his expression changed on the spot. His eyes widened slightly, revealing a look of shock and disbelief. This little brat, when did he become so bold? Qi Tianlong could not believe that the shocking words in the jade slip came from his son, Qi Huangji. In his mind, Qi Huangji had always been a foppish and idle person. Even though Qi Huangji had obviously grown a lot in the past month under Tianqing's service. But Qi Tianlong found it hard to believe that Qi Huangji had such courage to make such a shocking suggestion. After a short moment of shock, Qi Tianlong crushed the jade slip in his hand and fell into silence and hesitation. He could roughly guess that Qi Huangji's suggestion was most likely the idea of Sir Tianqing. But this question was no longer important. What he was most conflicted about now was whether to listen to Qi Huangji's suggestion or not. Should he take advantage of tonight's banquet to express his intentions to the imperial envoy face to face and make a request to the king? If I make this request face to face, I'll most likely be scolded by the imperial envoy. If the news reaches the king, he might even be angered and think that I, a newly promoted viscount, am unreasonably arrogant and don't know the rules. There's a 90% chance that the king will reject my request and leave a bad impression in his heart. But Qingshan City is already a mess, and it's located in the northernmost part of the continent, right next to the Sunset Seas. It's very important. Maybe, there's a 10% chance that the king will agree to my request. Qi Tianlong frowned and silently weighed the pros and cons. If there was enough time, he really wanted to calm down and seriously consider for 2 days before making a decision. But the steward had already gone to invite the imperial envoy, and the banquet was about to begin. The time left for him was at most 100 breaths. He had to make a decision. After a long time, Qi Tianlong took a deep breath, secretly gritted his teeth, and made a decision. He didn't waste any more time to change his clothes. After tidying up his appearance, he left the study and rushed to the reception hall where the banquet was held. Night fell. In the splendid reception hall, gemstone lamps were lit, and the brilliance was gorgeous and gentle. In the middle of the hall, there was a long dining table filled with delicacies and fine wine. The one sitting in the host's seat was naturally the imperial envoy. This was a middle-aged man wearing a python-patterned golden robe. His body was tall and sturdy, and his face was resolute. His bearing was noble and dignified, and his strength had reached the 6th level of the Divine Lord realm. This person was called Divine Lord Xuemo, and he was the right commander-in-chief of the Royal City Palace Guard. He had great authority. Qi Tianlong got the news from the Ning family that this person was the trusted aide of the third prince. Beside Divine Lord Xuemo, there was a white-haired old man with a fair face and jade-like skin. The old man's body was thin, and he looked weak. However, his clothes were very beautiful and exquisite, and there was not a speck of dust on them. He wore a jade crown and held a square handkerchief in his hand. From time to time, he covered his mouth and coughed, looking sickly. Even so, no one dared to despise him. Because this old eunuch was a favorite of the monarch, and he was a 7th-degree upper divine lord. Even Divine Lord Xuemo had to be respectful to him. In order to entertain Divine Lord Xuemo and the old eunuch, the Qi family took great pains. There were only 5 people at the big dining table. Besides the imperial envoy and the eunuch, there were only the family master Qi Tianlong and 2 elders. The 3 of them smiled apologetically and toasted to the imperial envoy and the old eunuch, flattering them secretly. After 3 rounds of wine, Divine Lord Xuemo put down the wine cup. The smile on his face disappeared, and he asked casually, "I heard that the governor of Yuan City was killed." Qi Tianlong's face froze, and his hand that was holding the wine cup trembled. Chapter 2893. Qi Tianlong had not found a chance to make a request to Sir God Xuemo unexpectedly. Sir God Xuemo spoke first. His tone was calm and indifferent, without the slightest emotion, making it impossible for others to guess his true thoughts. Qi Tianlong could not figure out Sir God Xuemo's intention. Was he going to make things difficult for the Qi family? After all, Sir God Xuemo said that the city master was killed, not that the city master was dead. There was only one word difference, but the meaning was different. Qi Tianlong put down his cup and calmed down. He nodded and said, "What the imperial envoy said is true. The city master of Yuan City was indeed killed. It happened a few days ago. Sir Godshwemo said again, I also heard that the Qi family and the city master's mansion have a grudge. Hearing this, the two elders of the Qi family changed their faces. They immediately put down their wine cups, not in the mood to eat or drink, and listened in silence. Qi Tianlong was under more pressure. He was worried. But he did not show it on his face. He replied calmly, Sir, you are well informed. There is indeed such a thing. Speaking of the origin of the grudge, we have to start from 70 years ago. That year, Qi Tianlong told Sir Godshwemo the origin of the fight in the Dark Light Cave. Sir Godshwemo nodded and said, So, the grudge between the Qi family and the city master's mansion is only limited to the fight in the Dark Light Cave. The city master's mansion has controlled the treasury for 70 years. They thought that it was in the bag. But they lost the martial arts competition and the Dark Light Cave was taken away by the Qi family. Viscount Tianlong, is that true? Qi Tianlong nodded and said yes. The old eunuch coughed and wiped his mouth with a square handkerchief. He asked in a sharp voice, although the treasury can produce a huge amount of wealth every year, it is very tempting. But no matter what, you should not have killed Yuan Chenkong and his son. After all, they were nobles bestowed by the monarch and the city lords under the rule of the divine kingdom. Viscount Tianlong, you can't bear this crime, right? Qi Tianlong quickly stood up and bowed. He said solemnly, Your Excellency's words make Tianlong extremely fearful. I will never agree with you. As everyone knows, Yuan Chenkong and his son died in the Setting Sun Sea area in the territory of the Black Mermaid clan. This matter has nothing to do with the Qi family. Tianlong will not break the law. Moreover, when Yuan Chenkong and his son died, Sky Dragon was waiting for orders in the capital and had not yet returned to Green Mountain City. Sirs, please judge clearly. The old eunuch nodded slightly and asked again, You weren't there when it happened, so of course the monarch knows. However, I've heard that your Qi family has recruited a new consecrator. His strength and methods are very powerful. The old eunuch obviously meant something else. With a smile on his face, Qi Tianlong replied respectfully, My lord, you must be joking. Tianqing is young and courageous, brave and resourceful. However, these were all small skirmishes that couldn't even enter the discerning eyes of the two lords. After all, he's just a young man who has yet to break through to the Divine Lord realm. He did not defend Ji Tianqing and deny that he killed Yuan Chenkong. Instead, he explained to the imperial envoy and the old eunuch that Ji Tianqing had not yet reached the Divine Lord realm. As long as one wasn't an idiot, one would understand that it was impossible for a young heavenly god realm cultivator to kill Yuan Chenkong. The old eunuch took a deep look at Qi Tianlong and said nothing. Sir Godshwemo smiled and said, Viscount Tianlong, don't be nervous. We are just asking casually. You're a new viscount and a meritorious official. Why would we suspect the Qi family? Qi Tianlong also smiled and cupped his hands, saying, Thank you, my lords, for your insight. Sir Godshwemo nodded and said earnestly, Remember what you've said tonight. Also, don't let down the monarch's trust and title. Qi Tianlong hurriedly agreed and took the opportunity to praise the king's wisdom and martial prowess, flattering him. Sir Godshwemo was gratified and the old eunuch also showed a rare smile. The banquet was about to end in such a harmonious atmosphere. However, Qi Tianlong plucked up his courage and said to the two lords, My lords, there's something that has been bothering Tianlong. After much consideration, Tianlong has decided to ask for your help. Sir Godshwemo looked at him with interest and asked, What's the matter? Qi Tianlong bowed deeply and said in a sincere tone, May Tianlong be so bold as to ask the two of you to help Qingshan City find a new ruler? Now, the city lord and his son are dead and the people in the city lord's mansion have fled in the night. The spacious city lord's mansion is empty and the people in the city guard department are in a panic. Countless guards are slacking off. The security in the city is deteriorating and it is gradually becoming chaotic. In addition, the Black Mermaids tribe in the Sunset Sea area is eyeing Qingshan City covetously and they are full of ambition. In recent days, the residents in the city are in a panic and many of them have the idea of escaping. Even the cases of missing persons, theft and murder are breaking out frequently. Qi Tianlong's tone was sorrowful and there was a bit of worry in it. As the saying goes, a city can't be without a lord. Qingshan City has no lord and there are rumors everywhere. The people are restless and uneasy. Aristocratic families like the Qi family have the ability to protect themselves and try their best to maintain the order in the city and protect the residents. However, our power is limited after all. I hope the two lords can report the situation to the monarch and appoint a new lord as soon as possible. Otherwise, the 3 million people in Qingshan City will be in danger. After saying that, Qi Tianlong bowed to Sir Godshwemo and the old eunuch. Sir Godshwemo and the old eunuch looked at each other and there was a strange look in their eyes. One was smiling faintly while the other was praising him. The old eunuch nodded slightly and said, "Viscount Tianlong cares about the country and the people. You care about the people and it is the blessing of Qingshan City." Sir Godshwemo pondered for a while and asked, "Viscount Tianlong, you are an aristocrat who has been in the city for hundreds of years. You know the situation better. What suggestions do you have for the current situation?" The meaning of this sentence was somewhat interesting. Qi Tianlong felt warm in his heart and he was grateful to the imperial envoy. He quickly replied, "The situation in Qingshan City is deteriorating rapidly and it has reached a very dangerous stage. In addition, the Black Mermaids tribe has been very active recently and there is a tendency for them to go south. Tianlong thinks that this matter must be decided as soon as possible to calm the people down." Of course, Tianlong also knows that the appointment of a lord is of great importance and it cannot be done rashly. However, the situation is urgent and we can be flexible. Why don't we appoint a person with both ability and integrity to take charge of the situation? Calm the people down and stabilize the situation in Qingshan City so that the monarch has enough time to consider. Hearing this, the old eunuch took a deep look at him again. Sir Godshwemo looked at the cave and pondered for a while. He nodded and said, "This method is feasible. After all, the people are the foundation of the country. The monarch doesn't want Qingshan City to fall into chaos. Viscount Tianlong, who do you think is a person with both ability and integrity who can take charge of the situation?" Qi Tianlong pretended to think seriously and asked, "Master Yuqi, Master Feng and Master Kai are all prestigious aristocratic families. I can choose one of the three." The old eunuch's eyes became more and more playful. Sir Godshwemo smiled and asked, "Among the three masters you recommend, who has a title?" Qi Tianlong was stunned and shook his head. "No. How can you be the temporary lord of the city if you don't have a title? This is not in accordance with the laws of the kingdom of God." Sir Godshwemo denied. Qi Tianlong frowned and muttered, "Then it's not easy to deal with this." Sir Godshwemo looked at him with a smile and asked, "Viscount Tianlong, are you not going to recommend yourself?" Qi Tianlong was stunned for a moment before he asked, "My lord, is this even possible? Is it in accordance with the laws?" Sir Godshwemo smiled and said, "The laws of the kingdom of God don't stipulate that you can't recommend yourself. Therefore, if you are willing to take the responsibility of calming the people down, you can recommend yourself." Chapter 2894. Viscount Tianlong, are you willing to maintain the stability of Green Mountain City and pacify millions of people? Sir Godshwemo looked at Qi Tianlong with a smile and asked, "Plus, you have to face the pressure of Black Mermaids tribe's possible invasion. In a short period of time, the Holy Nation won't send troops to help. You can only rely on your family to maintain the situation. Are you willing to bear the heavy responsibility and repay the monarch's appreciation?" Qi Tianlong's blood flowed quickly and he nodded solemnly, "It's my honor to serve the monarch and 3 million people." Sir Godshwemo nodded slightly and smiled, "That's great. I'll report this matter to the monarch in detail." The imperial envoy was swift and decisive and he didn't waste any time. Then, he took out a special jade slip and wrote a secret memorial to the monarch. After a while, he finished writing the secret memorial and sent it out solemnly. Qi Tianlong looked at the jade slip disappearing into the night sky and he was nervous. Success or failure would depend on the monarch's reaction. Sir Godshwemo was still relaxed and he smiled, "All right, let's continue drinking after we've finished our business." Qi Tianlong quickly agreed and took turns toasting Sir Godshwemo and the old eunuch with the 2 elders of Qi family. The toasting and flattery before was out of respect and flattery. Now, the toasting was more out of gratitude. Qi Tianlong knew clearly that Sir God Shui Mo had helped him a lot. That was why things went so smoothly. Fortunately, I was wrong after hearing it. I listened to Reverend Tianxing's suggestion. If I didn't gamble this time, I wouldn't know I'd be so lucky. Now, it's up to the monarch's decision. Everyone drank and chatted. The atmosphere was much warmer. About 15 minutes later, there was a spiritual light that flew back and landed in front of Sir God Shui Mo. The spiritual light dispersed and a special golden jade slip appeared. It was the secret memorial from the monarch. Sir God Shui Mo picked up the secret memorial and looked at Qi Tianlong with a smile. He asked mischievously, "Viscount Tianlong, the answer will be revealed soon. Are you nervous?" Qi Tianlong smiled awkwardly and cupped his hands. "Tianlong is stupid. I don't dare to guess the monarch's intention." Sir God Shui Mo stopped teasing him and read the contents of the secret memorial with divine sense. After reading it, he was stunned for a moment, and his expression was somewhat playful. Qi Tianlong's heart tightened, and he could not help but ask, "My lord, what does the monarch think?" Sir God Shui Mo looked at him with deep eyes and said solemnly, "The monarch's reply is only 4 words. Do as you deem fit." Qi Tianlong was stunned for a moment and then sighed. The monarch is indeed wise. His holy will is unpredictable. Imperial Envoy Daran is also a pillar of the country. To think that he is so trusted and valued by the monarch. The monarch's intention was obvious. He wanted Sir God Shui Mo to make the decision himself. Sir God Shui Mo could decide the position of the master of the city with a single thought. What kind of trust was that? The old eunuch reminded him in a timely manner, "I don't dare to speculate on the monarch's thoughts. However, I would like to remind you, Imperial Envoy, that behind acting on your own initiative, there is a joint responsibility. To put it simply, since Sir God Shui Mo made the decision, he had to be responsible." Qi Tianlong became the city lord. If he made contributions, he would also be rewarded for his ability to judge people. If Qi Tianlong messed things up and caused trouble, then he would be punished as well. Sir God Shui Mo pondered for a moment and looked at Qi Tianlong with burning eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Viscount Tianlong, you understand the monarch's intention and eunuch Li's words, right?" Qi Tianlong quickly bowed and said solemnly, "You are willing to trust me. I will be deeply grateful and never forget you. Rest assured, I will do my best to maintain the stability of Green Mountain City. Not only that, I will do my best to make contributions and not let you down." Sir God Shui Mo smiled satisfactorily and nodded, "Very good, Viscount Tianlong is loyal to the monarch. I admire you very much for the people of Green Mountain City. Now, I will use the monarch's verbal order to announce that Viscount Qi Tianlong will temporarily take over the position of the City Lord of Green Mountain City." The verbal order was not as formal as the conferment. It had to be announced to the world. However, this was the monarch's verbal order. It was still the final word. Qi Tianlong and the 2 elders of the Qi family were so excited that their blood was boiling. They quickly stood up and bowed, kowtowed, and thanked the monarch. Sir God Shui Mo and the old eunuch represented the monarch and received the 3 of them. This matter was settled. Everyone drank and chatted for a long time. After the guests and the host enjoyed themselves, they left the banquet. The next morning, the guards of Sir God Shui Mo and the old eunuch left the Qi residence. Qi Tianlong led the guards of the Qi family to send the imperial envoy out of the city and watched them leave. Soon after, Qi Tianlong personally led the guards and entered the luxurious mansion. Originally, there were only servants and servants left in the mansion. They were selling their belongings and running away. After the Qi family took over the mansion, they dismissed most of the servants and servants, leaving only a small number of them. At the same time, the guards of the Qi family purposely spread the news that the monarch had given a verbal order to appoint Qi Tianlong as the acting city lord. After the news spread, it immediately caused an uproar in Green Mountain City. Millions of people were discussing this matter. Most of them knew that the Qi family had killed Yuan Chengkong and his son, as well as the 2 consecrators of the mansion. But in the end, Qi Tianlong was not only made a viscount, but also the new city lord. This was simply too terrifying. However, everyone only guessed that the Qi family had killed Yuan Chengkong and his son. There was no evidence. Ordinary people did not dare to say it in public. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. The Feng family, Kai family, and Yuqi family were qualified to compete with the Qi family. But the Qi family was favored by the emperor. They were first made a viscount and then took over the position of the city lord. They also did not know if the Qi family had anything to do with the royal family and the monarch. Under such circumstances, no matter how shocked they were or how unwilling they were, they could only swallow their anger. Whoever dared to stand up against the Qi family would be seeking their own death. The Qi family could use the monarch's verbal order to get rid of them legitimately. Therefore, while Green Mountain City was bustling with noise and discussion, the three aristocratic families were very quiet. The process of the Qi family taking over Green Mountain City was very smooth. There was almost no resistance. In just one day, the city lord's mansion, the city guard department, and the various departments were all controlled by the Qi family. Qi Tianlong was confident that within 10 days, he could eradicate the remnants of the previous city lord and replace them with the Qi family. At that time, Green Mountain City would truly fall into the hands of the Qi family. At night, Qi Tianlong sat in the study of the city lord's mansion, looking at his surroundings with satisfaction. Men, drag these desks, chairs, and couches out and sweep them all. I don't want anything that Yuan Chengkong has used. Following his order, a few guards rushed into the study and began to move the items. Qi Tianlong thought for a while and ordered, "Send a message to the young master. Tell him to come back with consecrator Tianxing." Chapter 2895. Late at night, Qi Tianlong sat in the study room, concentrating on handling official business. He had just taken over the position of the city lord, and there were too many things to deal with. In the next month, he would not have much time to rest. However, no matter how hard it was, he would gladly endure it. At this time, a guard outside the door reported. Reporting to the city lord, the young city lord and Tianxing have returned. As soon as the Qi family took over the city lord mansion, these guards and servants cleverly changed the way they addressed him. To Qi Tianlong, they did not even need to call him the acting city lord. Anyway, everyone knew that the position of the city lord would definitely belong to Qi Tianlong. Even Qi Huangji was basking in the limelight, becoming the honorable young city lord. Qi Tianlong hurriedly put down the document in his hand and said, "Bring them in." The guard obeyed and bowed out of the study room. Immediately, Qi Huangji and Ji Tianxing stepped into the study room. "Father, you really did it." As soon as he entered the study room, Qi Huangji could not wait to rush to his father and give him a bear hug. Qi Tianlong was full of joy, but he could not help but scold, "Huangji, let go. You are now the young city lord, why are you still acting like a child? Where is your decency?" Pushing Qi Huangji away, he hurriedly greeted Ji Tianxing and bowed sincerely. "I thank young master Tianxing for his great kindness. If it were not for young master Tianxing's advice, personally experiencing danger, and making outstanding contributions, what did I, Qi Tianlong, do to make the Qi family so glorious?" Being conferred the title of viscount by the monarch and taking over the position of city lord was something he did not even dare to dream of before. And Ji Tianxing had only been in the Qi family for a month, and he had helped him realize his dream. Qi Tianlong's gratitude and respect for Ji Tianxing was really difficult to express in word. Ji Tianxing stretched out his hand and helped Qi Tianlong up. He smiled and said, "Patriarch, you are too serious. Although I have done my best, you also need to seize the opportunity to succeed. In short, this is everyone's credit." Qi Tianlong was even more moved. He praised from the bottom of his heart, "Young master's wisdom is unparalleled. You are so humble and courteous, and never arrogant. This Qi is truly moved that this tiny Qingshan city was able to welcome such a prodigy of worldly affairs like you. I don't know how much good fortune it has received." Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to reply, Qi Huangji laughed and said, "Father, how can a small temple like Qingshan town accommodate a great bodhisattva like him?" Brother Tianxing said that he will be leaving Qingshan city in 2 days. Hearing this news, Qi Tianlong's body stiffened. Leaving in 2 days. So sudden. He knew very well that someone like Ji Tianxing would not stay in Qingshan City forever. But he didn't expect Ji Tianxing to be in such a hurry to leave. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Now that the situation in Qingshan City has been settled, and the Qi family has gotten what they wanted, there's not much use for me to stay. I'll only attract more powerful enemies. The small Qingshan City could not bear the wrath of those big shots. After I leave, their target will naturally change, and the Qi family will be safe." Qi Tianlong's heart tightened, and complex emotions gushed out. His eyes were even a little red. "Young Master Tianxing, you've given so much thought to the Qi family, and the Qi family is deeply indebted to you. How can the Qi family repay you? I will never be able to repay this kindness." Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. "Master, you're too serious. Huanji has already repaid you, so you don't have to worry about this matter. Before I leave, I only have one last request." Qi Tianlong nodded without hesitation. "Young master, please speak." Ji Tianxing, "Master, please send a message to Miss Ning Xiyuan to ask if there's a result of that matter." Qi Tianlong frowned doubtfully. "That matter?" Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "You don't have to say much, just pass my words to her." "Okay, no problem." Qi Tianlong did not ask any more questions and agreed to this matter. The three of them sat down and chatted over tea. Qi Tianlong hesitated for a moment before asking the question in his heart. "Young Master Tianxing, it was your idea to ask Huanji to become the city lord, right? You're not in Qingshan City, and you haven't seen the imperial envoy, so how can you be sure that the envoy will agree?" Qi Huanji was also very doubtful, and looked at Ji Tianxing expectantly. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm only 80% sure, so I can't be 100% sure. I'm guessing that although the monarch is far away in the capital, he has a pervasive intelligence network, and his eyes and ears are all over the Bloodflame divine country. The monarch is well aware of the relationship between Yuan Chengkong and Princess Tianfeng. The monarch can also investigate the alliance between Yuan Chengkong, the Lu family, and the Bloodsword sect. Since the Bloodsword sect is involved, we have to consider the backing behind the Bloodsword sect, which is a big shot in the royal family. This kind of big shot is most likely a governor or a prince with the ability to fight for the throne." Hearing this, Qi Tianlong and his son had a vague idea. Ji Tianxing continued, "I've seen the information. The monarch is old and has plans to pass down the throne. After retiring, he wants to break through to the God King realm. Apart from the first prince, who died young, the monarch has 4 princes. These 4 have already made contributions and have considerable power, and they're fighting openly and covertly to inherit the throne. Therefore, I'm guessing that the big shot behind the Bloodsword sect should be a prince. The Bloodsword sect killed the innocent in Qingshan City and despicably stole the profound light cave. The monarch must know about this. However, the monarch pretended not to know because he didn't want to hurt that prince's face." Hearing this, Qi Tianlong suddenly understood and said, "Therefore, the monarch might be a little dissatisfied with that prince and the Bloodsword sect, but it's inconvenient for him to act. This time, the monarch sent an imperial envoy to bestow me the title. In order to avoid suspicion, he definitely wouldn't send that prince's people. Otherwise, he would be supporting that prince and the Bloodsword sect, which would only make the Bloodsword sect even more domineering." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "That's right. That prince also guessed the monarch's intentions, so the Bloodsword sect has recently disappeared without a trace and hasn't acted." Qi Tianlong added, "I heard from Ning Qinggang that the imperial envoy this time, God Monarch Bloodink, is a trusted aide of the third prince." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with certainty, "Since that's the case, the backer behind the Bloodsword sect is definitely not the third prince. Moreover, the third prince and that prince are most likely competitors." Hearing this, Qi Tianlong suddenly understood and slapped his thigh. "So that's how it is. No wonder God Monarch Bloodink didn't refuse when I tactfully suggested it at the banquet yesterday. Not only was he happy to see it happen, he even deliberately guided me and supported me. The monarch's orders allowed him to act as he pleased, but he also had to take responsibility. When I expressed my stance to him, he agreed without hesitation." Pausing for a moment, Qi Tianlong frowned and said, "So, God Monarch Blood Ink is deliberately trying to rope me in to strengthen the Third Prince's forces? Since I've already boarded the Third Prince's ship, I'm irreconcilable with the prince behind the Bloodsword sect. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, that's indeed the case. You should know what you're doing in the future. However, you don't have to worry. You're now the Third Prince's subordinate and also a viscount newly conferred by the monarch. As long as the people of the Bloodsword sect aren't crazy, they won't dare to act against you. As for me, I'm the target of their anger. Chapter 2896. After listening to Ji Tianxing's analysis, Qi Tianxing and Qi Tianxing were enlightened. They finally understood why the Qi clan had been doing so well for the past month. First, they were given the title of nobility, then they were appointed as the city lord and controlled the entire Green Mountain city. It turned out that all of this was within Ji Tianxing's expectations and calculations. Without a doubt, the Qi clan had the last laugh. And Ji Tianxing had sacrificed too much for this, and he was also in great danger. Qi Tianlong felt increasingly guilty, and his heart was filled with uneasiness and shame. Even though Ji Tianxing said that Qi Huangji had already repaid him. But Qi Tianlong still felt that it was not right to not prepare a generous gift to thank him. Young Master Tianxing, have you thought about where to go after leaving Green Mountain City? Qi Tianlong tried to ask Ji Tianxing about his whereabouts. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said calmly, although I will be wandering around the boundless heaven continent most of the time in the future. However, the first place they went to was Tianfeng and Tianshui County. Qi Tianlong hurriedly advised, the Princess of Tianfeng will definitely not let you go, so if you pass by Tianfeng County, try not to linger. Go straight to Tianshui County. I will send a message to Ning Qinggang and ask him to take care of you. This way, it will be more convenient for you to move around Tianshui County. Ji Tianxing did not refuse and said with a smile, thank you. Then, the three of them chatted for a while before going their separate ways. For the next 2 days, Qi Tianlong was busy taking over Qingshan City, and he was swamped with work every day. Qi Huangji was focused on gathering all kinds of resources and treasures. In order to prepare a gift for Ji Tianxing, he almost ran through the entire Green Mountain City. Ji Tianxing had been resting in the city lord's mansion and did not show up. When Yuan Chengkong's men left, they emptied the treasury of resources and many divine ability manuals in the library pavilion. However, there were still countless ancient books and records left in the library pavilion. Most of them were history books, biographies, astronomy, geography, travel notes, and all kinds of strange stories. To others, these things were of no value. They were not even as valuable as the Divine Ability Secret Manual. But to Ji Tianxing, these ancient books were also treasures. He had been staying in the library, eagerly flipping through the books. Through the scanning of his divine sense, he had flipped through over 10,000 books in a short 2 days. He also had a deeper understanding of the local customs of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, the Great Yang Empire, and the North Sky region. Unfortunately, other than the North Sky region, very little was known about the situation of the other regions. Not to mention the entire boundless heaven continent, as well as the regions outside the continent, there was almost no contact. Ji Tianxing was a little disappointed as he thought to himself, Yuan Chengkong is just a small city lord, his authority and status are too low. He is not qualified to come in contact with the news of the boundless heaven continent and the outside world. Perhaps even the Ning clan of the Tianshui County knew very little about the news outside the continent. What exactly had the current God realm become? What happened in the past 1,000 years? Ji Tianxing walked out of the library and bathed in the setting sun. Looking at the lotus pond and bamboo forest not far away, he pondered silently. How many of the 18 divine kings who followed me back then have fallen? How many of them were still alive? When can I recover to the divine king realm, leave the boundless heaven continent, and return to the Tianshan region of the primal chaos continent? Long before ascending, Ji Tianxing had a plan. After returning to the God realm, he would first recover his strength at the fastest speed and strive to return to the divine king realm as soon as possible. Then, he would return to the Tianshan region of the primal chaos continent, find his old subordinates, and investigate the whereabouts of the 18 divine kings. Finally, he would find out the truth of the matter back then, gather the strongest forces, and take revenge on the enemy. This was just the general idea. The specific details would depend on the situation. Moreover, this plan could not be realized in 3 to 5 years. It would definitely take a long time. Ji Tianxing was pondering. At this time, the expressions of 2 messenger guards flashed past in a hurry. When passing by him, the 2 hesitated for a moment. After bowing and greeting him, the 2 of them quickly flew away. Ji Tianxing saw the anxious expressions on their faces and guessed that something had happened when they went straight to the city master's study. However, the Qi family had just taken over Qingshan City, and there were many things happening in the past 2 days. Similar situations happened from time to time, and he was used to it. He did not think too much about it. He stepped across the stone bridge and the tree-lined path in the garden and returned to his residence. Just as he walked out of the garden, he saw the 2 messenger guards return in a hurry. When the 2 guards saw him, they had no choice but to stop and bow again. "Greetings, Master." After bowing, the 2 were about to leave. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Wait, why are you so flustered?" The 2 guards did not dare to leave and could only answer truthfully. "Master, a tragedy happened last night in Shufeng town, 100 miles south of the city. For some reason, more than 100 people disappeared without a trace. More than 300 spiritual birds and beasts died quietly and turned into a pool of blood. After the city guards went to investigate, they found more than 100 skeletons in a valley not far from the town. The skeletons were placed on the ground and pieced together into the shape of a sword. It was very strange." Ji Tianxing frowned immediately and had a bad premonition. What should come will come in the end. After muttering to himself, he asked again, "Then what did the city lord say after you reported it to him?" The 2 guards quickly replied, "After this incident, the tens of thousands of people in Shufeng town are in danger and are uneasy. The city master sent 300 city guards to guard Shufeng town. He strictly protected the town and prevented the news from leaking. At the same time, the city master sent a team of masters to investigate the specific cause and the murderer." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood and waved his hand to let the 2 leave. The 2 guards cupped their hands and bowed. Then, they quickly flew away to carry out their mission. Ji Tianxing returned to his residence and meditated in his bedroom. At the same time, he released his divine sense to envelop the city master's mansion and secretly observed the movements of the guards. When night fell, during this period of half an hour, 3 groups of messengers rushed into the city master's study. Obviously, at least 4 more things had happened and Qi Tianlong urgently needed to deal with them. In the dead of night, Qi Tianlong temporarily put down his official business and came to Ji Tianxing's residence. The 2 sat down in the living room. Qi Tianlong did not waste time and took out a communication jade slip. He went straight to the point and said, "Young Master Tianxing, Miss Ning sent back a communication jade slip. She asked me to tell you that there's some progress in that matter. But it's not clear in the jade slip. She hopes that you can go to the Ning family and talk to you face to face." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Thank you for your trouble." Qi Tianlong got up and bowed. "If there's nothing else, I won't disturb your rest. Goodbye." "Wait." Ji Tianxing raised his hand and stopped him. He asked in a low voice, "Family master, you look in a hurry and anxious. You should be in trouble." Qi Tianlong did not hide it and said with a wry smile, "Young Master Tianxing, you have sharp eyes. It seems that some people are very dissatisfied with me taking over as the city master. I've only been in office for 2 days and they can't wait to show off to me." Chapter 2897. Without Qi Tianlong's explanation, Ji Tianxing already had the answer in his heart. At this time, there were only 2 or 3 forces that dared to create a massacre in Qingshan City to show their strength to Qi Tianlong. "Tell me the specific situation." Ji Tianxing leaned on the armchair and said calmly. Qi Tianlong sorted out his thoughts and said, "It all happened last night. There were tragedies in 4 towns. Shufeng town in the south of the city, Dianfeng town in the east, Linhai town in the north, and Sanshan town in the west. In these 4 towns, more than 100 people disappeared for no reason. More than 300 spiritual birds and beasts quietly turned into blood water. When the massacre happened, no one in the whole town noticed. After that, I sent the city guards to investigate. They found the skeletons of the missing people in the valley near the town. More than 100 complete skeletons were placed on the ground in the shape of a sharp sword. After a pause, Qi Tianlong added another sentence. The tips of the 4 sharp swords were all pointing in the direction of Qingshan City. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and guessed the reason. He looked at Qi Tianlong calmly and asked, 4 towns were attacked at the same time in 4 directions of Qingshan City. Even the number of people and spiritual beasts that died was the same. The sharp swords of the skeletons were all pointed at Qingshan City. This is no longer a conspiracy, but a naked threat. Qi Tianlong nodded in agreement and said with indignation, the other party's intention is very clear. They are unscrupulous to destroy the stability of Qingshan City and deliberately create chaos and panic. Previously, I promised the imperial envoy that I would maintain the stability of Qingshan City and that there would not be the slightest mistake. I just took over Qingshan City for 2 days and the other party has already created 4 tragedies. If the news spreads, everyone will think that I, Qi Tianlong, have no ability and no qualification to manage Qingshan City. Not only will the imperial envoy be humiliated, but the third prince will also lose face. Ji Tianqing added, this is only the other party's first move. They first disturbed the 4 towns outside the city. The sharp swords of the 4 skeletons were all pointed at Qingshan City. It means that if we don't give in, their next target will be Qingshan City. Qi Tianlong also thought of this point and said with a serious face, now that only 4 small towns are in trouble, I can still send a large number of city guards to block the news. However, if the other party sneaked into Qingshan City, killed the innocent, and created a bloody massacre, there was no way the news could be kept under wraps. The city was about to fall into chaos. At that time, as the new city lord, I will have no choice but to abdicate in order to give an explanation to the people. The imperial envoy and the third prince would lose face because of this. In fact, the king might even punish me in his rage. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm as he said, that's right, the consequences are just as you predicted. Although you have been wronged, these tragedies were deliberately caused by someone. However, the common people didn't understand and didn't care about this. The monarch did not want to know the reason, he only wanted to know the result. He only knows that you don't have the ability to govern Qingshan City well. Qi Tianlong thought for a moment and said, the other party did this to give me a warning. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't have started a massacre in Qingshan City. This means that they didn't want to make a big deal out of it to prevent the third prince and the king from investigating the culprit. They were only pressuring me, hoping that I would back off. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, who do you think the culprit is? Qi Tianlong was silent for a moment, then said word by word, the blood sword sect. Ji Tianqing also agreed with this answer. However, he still asked, why don't you suspect Princess Qianfeng? Qi Tianlong shook his head and said with certainty, he has the guts, but he doesn't necessarily have the qualifications. This matter is too risky for him. Once he does this, he will completely offend the third prince, and his future will be difficult to protect. However, the blood sword sect is different. They have already pledged allegiance to another prince and are competing with the third prince for the throne. They are used to offending the third prince. Ji Tianqing revealed a look of praise and said with a gratified tone, I'm very pleased that you can remain calm, not panic in the face of danger, and even analyze the pros and cons of this matter. This way, when I leave Azure Mountain City, you will also be able to control it. Also, you have to remember that even if we know that the blood sword sect is behind this, we can only tacitly agree to it. We don't have any evidence, so we can't use this to attack the blood sword sect. The blood sword sect can just throw the blame to the Black Mermaids. After all, the Black Mermaids have already taken the blame, so adding another one won't matter. Qi Tianlong nodded solemnly, indicating that he understood. Shortly after, he frowned and asked, young Master Tianqing, you've decided to leave? Yes. Ji Tianqing said calmly, I'll be leaving tomorrow morning. You have to cooperate with me to put on a show. The momentum must be great. Qi Tianlong was a little unwilling and asked, "What if the other party's target is me and not you? Do you really have to leave?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Don't think that you're lucky. I'm the target of public criticism. The Blood Sword sect and Princess Qianfeng aren't stupid. They know that I killed Yuan Chengkong and his son, Yang Zong, consecrator Shi, and the elders of the Blood Sword sect. The person they want to get rid of the most is me. Only when I leave Azure Mountain City and allow them to surround and kill me will they let the Qi family go." Qi Tianlong was silent for a long time. His heart was filled with anger and unwillingness as he clenched his fists tightly. That despicable Princess Qianfeng and the Blood Sword sect. I only hate that I'm weak and that my words carry no weight. If there comes a day when I have the authority and power, I'll definitely destroy Princess Qianfeng and the Blood Sword sect. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm glad that you have such intentions. However, you don't have to do this. You just focus on managing Azure Mountain City and wait for the show. At most, you'll get your wish in half a year." Ah! Qi Tianlong was shocked as he stared at Ji Tianxing with his mouth agape. He simply didn't dare believe that Ji Tianxing would actually be so confident to speak such bold word. In half a year, he would be able to destroy Princess Qianfeng and the Blood Sword sect. Wasn't this a little too exaggerated? He was just a heavenly god, not a high divine lord. He wasn't even a high divine lord with authority. How was it possible? Qi Tianlong couldn't believe it. However, ever since he met Ji Tianxing, he had seen Ji Tianxing create one miracle after another. He still had some expectations and a trace of hope in his heart. Since young Master Tianxing is so confident, I'll wait for the good news, Qi Tianlong said with emotion as he bowed deeply to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "The Ning family and the third prince are two great helpers. If you can grasp them well, you might be able to become a princess in the future. In short, be careful and seek stability first." Chapter 2898. This was Ji Tianxing's last lesson to Qi Tianlong before he left. Qi Tianlong learned a lot from it and engraved it in his heart. After discussing business, Qi Tianlong took his leave and continued to deal with government affairs. Of course, he did not forget to prepare a mighty guard of honor according to Ji Tianxing's instructions. Midnight. Qi Huangji received the news that Ji Tianxing would be leaving early the next morning. He hurried to Ji Tianxing's residence and took out a purple jade box. "Brother Tianxing, why are you in such a hurry to leave? If only you gave me 2 more days, I would have prepared all the gift." Apparently, Qi Huangji's gift was not ready and was only 80% complete. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was leaving early the next morning, so he could only regret it. Ji Tianxing reached out and took the box. He smiled and said, "All right, I'm already very happy that you have such intentions. No matter how many treasures and resources there are, they are just worldly possessions and are not as precious as a person's heart." Qi Huangji's heart was moved when he heard this. He said emotionally, "That's right. Brother, you are absolutely right. Just like how you are indebted to the Qi family, even billions of divine stones cannot be exchanged for that. With your wisdom and talent, anyone who can get your help can easily be made a marquis, let alone a governor or a princess." Ji Tianxing just smiled and did not comment. In fact, Qi Huangji did not know what he was capable of. Being made a marquis in a small kingdom? Haha. That was too insulting. Of course, Qi Huangji was not to blame. He did not mean to underestimate Ji Tianxing. He could only blame himself for being born lowly and being ignorant. He would probably be a frog in a well for the rest of his life. "Brother Tianxing, I know that you will travel the world and fly higher and farther in the future. So, there are only 3 rare treasures in the gifts I prepared for you. The other things are divine crystals, all kinds of pills, talismans, and formation plates that you need for cultivation. Unfortunately, those cultivation resources only add up to about 5 billion. Moreover, the quality of those divine crystals is slightly low, and the divine energy they contain isn't too abundant." Qi Huangji introduced the items in the treasure box with an apprehensive and ashamed expression. He felt that he had let Ji Tianxing down. Ji Tianxing naturally knew why those divine crystals were of a slightly lower grade. It was him who did it. He couldn't say it out loud, so he could only comfort Qi Huangji. You don't have to blame yourself. This gift is already very valuable. I'm very satisfied. Seeing that he was truly happy, Qi Huangji felt relieved. The next morning, the sun had just risen. The sky had just brightened, and on the plaza of the city lord's mansion, there was already a guard of honor of 200 people neatly lined up. After a burst of gongs and drums, the city lord, the young city lord, and Ji Tianxing appeared. In front of the honor guard, countless guards, and servants, Qi Tianlong loudly announced a piece of news. From this day onwards, young Master Tianxing will resign from his position in the Qi clan and leave Qingshan City. The Qi clan was very grateful for young Master Tianxing's help, and were very reluctant to let him leave. They had repeatedly urged him to stay. However, young Master Tianxing was a dragon among men with a bright future. Naturally, he couldn't be trapped in a small Qingshan city. The Qi clan didn't want to hinder young Master Tianxing's future, so they respectfully sent young Master Tianxing out of the city. I wish young Master Tianhang good fortune and that he will be able to overcome misfortune and become famous in the near future. Of course, in order to thank young Master Tianxing for his wholehearted help, the Qi clan had also prepared an extremely generous gift. As for what the gift was and how much it was worth, it was inconvenient for them to announce it to the public. Suddenly hearing this news, the crowd was in an uproar, and everyone was shocked. No one expected that at the most glorious moment of the Qi clan, young Master Tianxing, who had contributed the most to the Qi clan, would leave. What was going on? Could it be that young Master Tianxing was also going to follow the example of the legendary hermit who retired after achieving success? Or could it be that young Master Tianxing and the Qi clan were at odds, and had a dispute on the distribution of benefits? Or even, after the Qi clan gained both fame and fortune, he wanted to kick away the greatest contributor. All in all, 1,000 people had 1,000 faces, and everyone had different guesses. However, no one believed Qi Tianlong's words. It was too dignified. Was he trying to fool a 3-year-old child? Fortunately, these people were all from the city lord's mansion, and could be considered as Qi Tianlong's retainers and servants. Even if they had guesses and criticisms, they would only talk about it in private, and wouldn't dare to spread it casually. But Qi Tianlong had made such a big scene, and the entire Qingshan city's people would soon know about this matter. At that time, when 2 to 3 million people talked about it, it would be hard to stop. There would definitely be thousands of guesses. In fact, there would be a lot of malicious, insidious, and irresponsible rumors and slanders. This point, even the retainers and servants of the city lord's mansion could foresee. As the city lord, how could Qi Tianlong not foresee it? But he could only do this because this was Ji Tianxing's request, to let him cooperate with the show. It was to let everyone think that Ji Tianxing and the Qi clan didn't break up peacefully. There must be some unspeakable reason that the two sides parted ways and turned hostile. In this way, it would fulfill some people's wishes, and the Qi clan would be safer. When Qi Tianlong learned of Ji Tianxing's request, he immediately objected and rejected it. He was very clear that this would definitely destroy Ji Tianxing's reputation and affect his prestige. But he couldn't resist Ji Tianxing's persuasion and insistence, and could only agree and do as he was told. In this way, his guilt and gratitude towards Ji Tianxing became even more unforgettable. Soon, the sun rose slowly. Qi Tianlong and his son led the guard of honor, escorting Ji Tianxing out of the city lord's mansion, and walked towards the South City Gate. Along the way, countless commoners who heard the news and rushed over crowded the streets to watch and discuss. The news spread very quickly. 2 hours later, when the guard of honor left the South City Gate and respectfully sent off Ji Tianxing, half of the people in the city knew. Qingshan City was bustling with noise and excitement. Millions of people were discussing, and many large and small forces and families were also secretly analyzing. Of course, countless spies lurking in Qingshan City also reported this news to their respective forces. In short, from today onwards, Ji Tianxing and the Qi clan broke off, and no longer had anything to do with each other. At least in the eyes of the public, this was the case. Qi Tianlong and his son stood outside the city gate, watching Ji Tianxing fly into the sky and disappear into the horizon, Their eyes were full of guilt and reluctance. This was not an act, but a true display of emotions. But unfortunately, in the eyes of others, they felt that the father and son's acting skills were superb. After standing outside the city gate for a long time, Qi Tianlong gave the order to return home. The mighty guard of honor stopped beating gongs and drums, and returned to the city lord's mansion in silence. Hundreds of thousands of onlookers also dispersed. This matter ended here. Everyone knew that for a long time, Qingshan City would return to peace. Without the monstrous Qianxing, Qingshan City would be as calm as water, no longer exciting. Chapter 2899. 6 hours later. Ji Tianxing had already flown 500,000 miles away from Green Mountain City. He had already removed his disguise and returned to his original appearance. He was wearing a white robe, with black hair and black eyes. He was a handsome human god. Moreover, he was riding a majestic black dragon, galloping high up in the sky. Now that he had left the Qi family and Green Mountain City, there was no need for him to disguise himself. He believed that the Blood Sword sect and Princess Qianfeng would be watching him leave Green Mountain City. Even if he didn't use his divine sense, he could guess it. There must be a lot of spies and scouts in the mountains not far from him, watching his movements. Furthermore, those people had already heard the news and knew that he would pass by Qianfeng County before going to Qianxue County. However, this was the result he wanted. The black dragon flew south. He sat cross-legged on the dragon's back and meditated with his eyes closed. The silver-haired white dragon waited beside him. Seeing his master so confident and relaxed, the white dragon couldn't help but ask, "Master, if we leave in such a big way, people will think that we have fallen out with the Qi family. Aren't you worried that Princess Qianfeng and the Blood Sword sect can't wait to kill us? Although you are powerful and don't fear their schemes, we are still weak. But after all, we are alone and weak. Those two forces have many experts and are local tyrants. We will definitely be at a disadvantage." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said indifferently, "Although I have never met Princess Qianfeng and the Blood Sword sect, I don't know their strength. However, this is just a small divine nation. Even in the entire Great Yang Empire, the most powerful people are only high divine lords. Even peak divine lords might not exist. God kings are unheard of. Tell me, what do I have to fear?" "Ah." The white dragon was stunned and said with surprise, "Master, it seems that you don't want to keep a low profile and develop. If you go south in such a big way, you will definitely attract endless slaughter. Are you going to kill your way to Qianxue City or even the entire Bloodflame divine nation?" Ji Tianxing didn't deny it and said indifferently, "As a true god and heavenly god, I need to keep a low profile and develop. Now that Master has already recovered to the Divine Lord realm, what need is there to have too many misgivings? If these gods of the non-human kind insist on seeking death, I don't mind killing them until their heads roll and staining the mountains and rivers red with blood. Anyway, the more divine race powerhouses I kill, the faster your master's strength increases." Bai Long's eyes sparkled as he said expectantly, "If that's the case, then it's going to be interesting." Looking at the entire Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, he reckoned that his master would be unstoppable. However, this kind of massacre is quite different from your style 1,000 years ago. Back then, Kenshin was also decisive in killing, and millions of corpses fell to his sword. However, the Kenshin would only kill those who deserved to be killed. They would never kill the innocent, nor would they allow the killing to continue. In principle, we will exercise restraint. As for the current Ji Tianxing, White Dragon always felt that he had let go of himself and was leaning towards the devil. He thought to himself, could it be that teacher was affected by the devouring divine ability and his deity heart was demonized? This shouldn't be the case. Master has the heart of a divine king. How could he be so easily bewitched? At this moment, a figure flashed beside Ji Tianxing. A graceful fiery red figure appeared. This person was Ji Ku. She wore a fiery red dress, and her scarlet hair reached her waist. Her entire body was bathed in holy light. Little White, don't let your imagination run wild. Big brother Tianxing definitely won't go berserk, nor will he become a great devil. He just can't wait and wants to step out of the boundless heaven continent as soon as possible to find his old subordinates and take revenge on the 5 divine kings. In addition, although he never mentions Wuhan, this is his biggest worry. He's worried about Wuhan's safety. He just wants to recover to the Divine King realm as soon as possible so that he can go to the Dragon realm to find Wuhan. Jiku stood beside Ji Tianxing and explained the reason in a calm tone. Only then did White Dragon come to a realization. He nodded repeatedly and said, "I see. Master's wife understands teacher's thoughts better." Jiku nodded slightly and said with a somewhat gloomy expression, "Actually, senior sister and I both understand big brother Tianxing's thoughts. We share his anxieties and worries. Unfortunately, the speed of our strength improvement is still too slow. It's difficult to help him at the moment." Hearing this, the White Dragon also showed a look of shame. The atmosphere was a little gloomy. Ji Tianxing smiled and comforted them, "You don't have to blame yourselves. Compared to all the other gods, your growth is already fast enough. We can't settle down in the short term. You just have to work hard and cultivate. As for plundering cultivation resources and treasures, I can do this kind of thing." To put it simply, he would be outside for the short term. Jiku, Yun Yaro, and the others only needed to cultivate in seclusion in the Divine Pagoda and improve their strength. In the future, if Ji Tianxing could find his old subordinates or establish a powerful force, they would come out to help. This was the best choice. At this moment, in the vast sea of clouds ahead, a bloody light suddenly lit up the sky. Whoosh! A vast expanse of crimson light with a radius of 10,000 kilometers swept over from all directions, blocking the Black Dragon's path. In the dazzling bloody light, hundreds of figures could be vaguely seen. The leaders were 2 Divine Lord powerhouses with tyrannical auras. The one on the left was 100 feet tall and his whole body was golden like a giant ape. The Divine Lord on the right was more than 30 feet tall and wore a purple robe and a bronze mask. His body was as straight as a sword and he held a crimson sword in his arms. His aura was extremely fierce. The other 100 or so people were all heavenly god realm experts dressed in tight-fitting black clothes and wearing skull masks. Under the cover of the bloody light, these people sealed off the sky for thousands of miles and blocked Black Dragon's path. The Black Dragon was forced to stop. He maintained a distance of 100 miles from that group of people and remained vigilant. Ji Tianxing, Jiku, and White Dragon all frowned and looked at the bloody light with murderous intent in their eyes. He. It's rare that they can wait until now. How long have they been waiting outside the city? White Dragon's face was as cold as ice and he said in a low voice, "They are indeed the bastards of the Bloodsword sect. From the looks of it, the massacre that happened in the 4 small towns was done by this group of people." Jiku's gaze swept across the experts and finally landed on the 2 Divine Lords. Her eyes were a little serious as she warned, "Big brother Tianxing, those are 2 middle-level Divine Lords. You have to be careful." Ji Tianxing smiled disapprovingly and said with a relaxed expression, "One is a 5th-level Divine Lord and the other is a 6th-level Divine Lord. There's nothing to worry about. Moreover, they are not the only ones waiting to ambush us here." Jiku and White Dragon immediately understood his meaning and became even more vigilant. At the same time, the purple-robed Divine Lord and the giant also looked at Black Dragon with sharp eyes and sized up Ji Tianxing's group. The purple-robed Divine Lord was rather surprised and a look of astonishment flashed across his eyes. "How could this be? Did we find the wrong person? That shouldn't be. Ever since that kid left Azure Mountain City, our spies have been following him. We can't be wrong." End of chapter. Chapter 2900. The purple-robed Divine Lord's expression was very strange. News from more than 10 spies proved that Ji Tianxing had left Azure Mountain City alone. He didn't have a mount, companions, or followers. And now, not only was the white-robed kid riding a black dragon, he also had 2 companions. Most importantly, the white-robed youth was a human. He didn't look like a revered Tianxing at all. At this moment, the purple-robed Divine Lord couldn't help but wonder if he had stopped the wrong person. Seeing the purple-robed Divine Lord in a daze, the 300-meter-tall Divine Lord Giant Ape sent a voice transmission in puzzlement. "Lord Kenshin, what's the matter?" The purple-robed divine lord wearing a bronze mask was known as Lord Kenshin. He was the left protector of the Bloodsword sect. 500 years ago, his strength had already reached the 6th level of the Divine Lord realm. For the past few hundred years, he had been nurturing his divine Tao foundation, accumulating strength and comprehension, preparing to break through to the 7th stage. Once he succeeded, he would be promoted to a high divine lord. He was one of the 4 elders of the Bloodsword sect and specialized in the Bloodsword Manual's Heart Demon sword. His attainments were unfathomable. Once the Heart Demon Bloodsword was used, not only could it slay the body of a divine spirit, it could also use the Heart Demon to destroy the soul, making it impossible to guard against. In the 5,000 years since he became famous, the number of Divine Lord experts who died under his sword was at least 2,000, if not 3,000. Normally, Lord Kenshin would stay in the Bloodsword sect's main altar to cultivate and nurture his divine Tao. Only when there was an important mission or an extremely troublesome expert would the Bloodsword sect send him out. After a month of fighting, Ji Tianxing had become an extremely troublesome expert in the eyes of the Bloodsword sect. But the scene in front of him made Lord Kenshin somewhat dazed. Hearing the giant ape divine lord's question, he immediately regained his senses and shook his head. The information I received was that Tianxing left Azure Mountain City alone. But this human youth in front of us doesn't look like Tianxing. Not only is he riding a black dragon, he also has 2 companions. The giant ape divine lord nodded and said in a deep voice, "You mean we intercepted the wrong target?" Lord Kenshin nodded and said, "That's possible." Not only was Tianxing powerful, but he was also good at scheming. I suspect that he may have gotten rid of the spies and quietly escaped. As for the 3 people in front of us, they should be the bait that he deliberately set up. Sir God Giant Ape grinned and sneered with a bloodthirsty face. If that's the case, it means those 3 guys are related to Tianxing. Then what are we waiting for? Take them down immediately and torture them until they reveal Tianxing's whereabout. Kenshin Kuan was an executioner who killed people like scything flax. How could he be merciful? However, he gestured to Sir God Giant Ape to not act rashly. There's no rush for now. Let's observe the situation first. There's another group of people who seem to be more anxious than us. Where is it? Sir God Giant Ape immediately became alert and released his consciousness to search around. Meanwhile, in the sky to the northwest, there was also a black shadow that was thousands of feet long. It was rushing over as fast as lightning. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the black shadow came close and stopped in the sky 100 miles away from the black dragon. After the brilliance dissipated, the black shadow could be seen clearly. It was a divine vessel. The divine vessel was simple and there were no obvious features. There was no emblem on the body of the divine vessel, so it was hard to tell which force it belonged to. However, Ji Tianxing did not need to think too much to guess that the divine vessel was most likely sent by Princess Tianfeng. However, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, Infanta Tianfeng had concealed the characteristics and insignia of the divine warship. Even the masters and experts on the divine battleship would not be Princess Tianfeng's men. They were most likely assassins that she had secretly trained or people that she had borrowed from other forces. Just as expected. After the hatch of the divine vessel opened, hundreds of elite experts flew out. They were all at LV7 or LV8 Heavenly God Realm. These elite experts were all wearing black armor and helmets that covered their faces. Only their eyes could be seen. The 2 leading experts were also Sir Gods. They were middle-aged men who were more than 10 feet tall. Both of them were wearing pitch-black armor and the same black iron mask. They looked very mysterious. Tianxing, you won't be able to escape today. Just surrender. The moment they flew out of the divine vessel, the leading Sir God in black armor shouted with murderous intent. However, when he saw the situation clearly, his body shook and he was stunned on the spot. Who are you? Where is that bastard Tianxing? The other Sir God in black armor pointed at Ji Tianxing and the other 2 and asked in a dignified tone. At the same time, the 2 Sir Gods saw a crimson light that covered the sky 100 miles away. In the crimson light, there were 2 Sir Gods leading hundreds of black-robed experts. Seeing this, The two Sir Gods in black armor looked at each other and instantly understood. The group of people shrouded in the crimson light had the same intention. They were here to kill Tianxing. Everyone was silent and the atmosphere was a bit strange. Then, Ji Tianxing stood up and looked at the two groups of people calmly. He said loudly, "I don't care where you are from or what your purpose is. I just want to say that you have found the wrong person. I am City Lord Shongning of the Raging Flame Divine Country. I am on a business trip to your country and I just passed by." Ji Tianxing's voice was calm and contained strong confidence and majesty. Even Ji Ku and Bai Long couldn't find any loopholes, let alone the people of the Bloodsword sect and the Princess of Tianfeng. The two groups of people were stunned on the spot. The expressions of the experts and the four Sir Gods became quite interesting. This guy is full of confidence. He doesn't seem to be lying. Did we really find the wrong person? That's possible. Tianxing, that bastard, has always been crafty and cunning. I think that bastard might have escaped by another route. The City Lord of Shongning in front of us just happened to pass by here unknowingly. Tianxing, that bastard, is too treacherous. If we kill City Lord Shongning directly, we will cause trouble for the Raging Flame Divine Country. Don't trust City Lord Shongning too much. Maybe he is Tianxing in disguise. Tianxing is sinister and cunning. Who can tell the truth from the lies? Yes. Don't let your guard down. Everyone was discussing secretly through voice transmission. Most of them were fooled by Ji Tianxing and believed that he was the city lord of a neighboring country. However, Kenshin was still suspicious and didn't want to believe it so easily. At this moment, Ji Tianxing took out another black iron order and waved it in front of the crowd. He said righteously, "This is my city leader's order. All of you, take a good look. I have an important mission and will be heading to your country's capital soon. I don't care who you are, get out of my way. If you dare to disrespect this seat will definitely report to your king and punish you." After that, Ji Tianxing put away the dark iron order and ordered Black Dragon to fly south. The two Sir Gods in black armor hesitated. They wanted to stop Black Dragon, but they didn't dare to take the risk. The two of them were stunned and discussed secretly, but they couldn't make up their minds. Even the people of the Bloodsword sect seemed to be stunned, standing in place as they watched Black Dragon leave. Chapter 2901. Black Dragon left unhurriedly. 100 breaths later, he was 20,000 miles away. At this moment, Lord Kenshin was about to leave with the people of Bloodsword sect. The two black-armored divine sovereigns hurried forward and respectfully greeted them. "Seniors, please wait." Lord Kenshin and Lord Giant Ape stopped and turned to look at the two black-armored divine sovereigns. "What's the matter? What do you want?" Lord Kenshin's tone was calm, cold, and indifferent. Lord Giant Ape's temper flared, and a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. The two black-armored divine sovereigns hurriedly cupped their hands and explained. "Seniors, please calm your anger. We have no ill intentions. There are some things that we have a tacit understanding of. However, we would like to ask the two seniors, why didn't you stop City Lord Tranquility and let him leave so easily?" Lord Kenshin sneered, "Fools." He announced his identity and took out his identity token, indicating that he was the city lord of a neighboring country. Who would dare to attack them? Not to mention killing them, even injuring and detaining them would cause a dispute between the two countries. At that time, even the ruler would have to apologize to the ruler of the neighboring country. Can you bear the consequences? Ah! The two black-armored divine sovereigns froze for a moment before smiling embarrassedly. So that's how it is. Senior, you're so considerate. Since Senior has decided, we won't overstep our boundaries. We'll see you off. The two didn't dare to say anything more. They bowed and respectfully saw the people of Bloodsword sect off. Whoosh! The sky was filled with bloody light as it flew toward the south. The two black-armored divine sovereigns stood in place and watched the people of Bloodsword sect disappear into the horizon. After a moment of silence, the divine sovereign on the left said, "All right, there's no need to watch anymore. The princess told us not to provoke the people of Bloodsword sect. Contact other spies and find a way to investigate Tianxing's whereabouts." After saying that, he turned to leave. The black-armored divine sovereign on the right trembled as he suddenly thought of something. "Hey BA, have you seen the city lord token of a neighboring country?" The divine emperor called Hey BA frowned in confusion. "I've never seen him before. Why do you ask?" The divine monarch on the right said with a burning gaze, "I've never seen him before, so we can't tell if that city lord Shongning is real or not." However, the people of the Bloodsword sect had always been arrogant and despotic. They also have the same doubts. Why would they let that person go so easily? Despot vaguely understood what he meant, and said in a low voice, "Kai Liuxing, you mean, the people of the Bloodsword sect lied to us? They don't believe that city lord Shongning at all. They just don't want us to find out. Actually, they didn't go home, but went to hunt down that tranquil city lord." Kai Liuxing quickly nodded and said in a serious tone, "That's right. If we chase after them now, we should still be able to make it." Hey BA was a bit hesitant as he worriedly asked, "But by the time we get there, the Bloodsword sect will have already taken down city lord Shangning. Don't tell me that we can snatch someone from the Bloodsword sect." Kai Liuxing sneered, "The Bloodsword sect has been like the sun in the sky in recent years. Of course, we can't provoke them. However, we can watch from the sidelines and see who that city lord Shongning is. If we're lucky enough, we might even be able to find Tianxing's whereabouts. Only then can we complete the princess's mission." Despot pondered for a moment before clenching his teeth and making up his mind. "Fine, then we'll do as you say. Let's take a gamble." "That's right." Kai Liuxing revealed a gratified smile. Then, the two returned to the divine ship with over 100 black-armored experts and chased toward the south. Meanwhile, Black Dragon was carrying Ji Tianxing, Ji Ku, and White Dragon, speeding through the sky. Suddenly, a bloody light burst out from the sea of clouds behind them. Heart Kenshin led over 100 elite experts and chased after them as fast as lightning. The distance between the two sides was constantly shrinking. 8,000 li, 5,000 li, 3,000 li. Soon, the distance between the two sides was reduced to 100 li. Heart Kenshin shouted in a booming voice, "City Lord Shongning, please wait." As he shouted, Sir God Giant Ape and the other experts spread out and encircled him. When the two sides were still 20,000 li apart, Ji Tianxing sensed that the people of Bloodsword sect were following them. Only now did he have Black Dragon stop and turn to look at Heart Kenshin. Hehe, this guy is indeed not easy to deceive. He's still caught up. Ji Tianxing sneered, cold killing intent flashing in his eyes. White Dragon and Ji Ku both nodded inwardly with a sneer on their lips. This guy just escaped a calamity and doesn't know it yet. He's actually rushing to his death. His courage is commendable. This guy is very strong. He's either an elder or a protector of Bloodsword sect. While the three were conversing, Heart Kenshin had already caught up. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a faint smile and asked in a playful tone, "May I ask for City Lord Shongning's name? Also, can I have a look at your identity token?" Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and sneered disdainfully, "Who do you think you are? You think you're worthy to ask for my name and see my City Lord token?" Heart Kenshin's face turned red from the humiliation and his eyes flashed with killing intent. He didn't bother to keep up the pretense and sneered, "Hey, you dare to be so arrogant in your own country's territory? You really don't know the meaning of death. I don't care if you're the real City Lord Shongning or a fake, I can't let you go. Men, capture him for me." Heart Kenshin waved his hand and the giant ape divine lord and hundreds of elite experts pounced on Black Dragon with murderous intent. Everyone waved their swords, spears, swords, and halberds, splashing out divine arts that blotted out the sky as they surrounded Ji Tianxing's group. Most of the divine art shadows that blotted out the sky were multicolored and had a variety of elemental powers. There were only 10 experts who cultivated the sword arts of the Bloodsword sect, and all of them were elites. Ji Tianxing immediately realized that only Shin Kenshin and the 10 experts were disciples of the Bloodsword sect. The giant ape divine lord and the 90 black-clothed experts were either vassals of the Bloodsword sect or helpers invited from other forces. "A bunch of reckless fools, I'll send you to heaven," Ji Tianxing sneered. His wide sleeves fluttered, and his palms instantly shot out thousands of dazzling golden sword lights. Swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, Thousands of golden sword lights had sealed off an area of 250 kilometers around them. They were as dazzling as the scorching sun in the sky. The sword lights crisscrossed and shuttled back and forth, mercilessly killing many black-clothed experts. The overwhelming divine spell shadows were immediately destroyed by the sword light, and a violent shockwave burst forth. Then, one after another, the black-clothed experts were cut in half by the dazzling golden sword light. Blood splattered everywhere. Jiku also took out her origin stone divine spear and attacked with all her strength. She waved her divine spear with all her might, thrusting out 360 sky-piercing spear shadows in a row. Wherever the sky-piercing spear shadows went, countless divine lights were shattered. The 5-colored divine flames swept across, and the experts that came into contact with the nirvana and heaven-burning divine flames were immediately turned into pitch-black charcoal. Bai Long also transformed into a silver-white divine dragon and shuttled through the sky like lightning, fiercely fighting on the battlefield. Chapter 2902. Both parties had only fought for 100 breaths of time, but the world was already dyed red. Nearly half of the black-robed experts died on the spot. Shrapnel and blood mist filled the sky. The smell of blood filled the air within a 1,000-mile radius. Ji Tianqing controlled the divine power of heaven and earth and guided the light of the stars to form 10,000 swords into a sword formation. The sword formation sealed off a 1,000-mile radius and killed everything mercilessly. The two Sir Gods, Xin Jian and Giant Ape, were still able to resist the power of the heaven-destroying sword formation and would not be defeated in a short period of time. However, most of the hundreds of black-clothed experts were covered in cuts and bruises from the sword light, dripping with blood. Ji Ku, Hei Long, and Bai Long also used their ultimate moves and attacked the black-robed experts fiercely. The black-robed experts were exhausted from resisting the attacks of the 10,000 swords and did not have the strength to fight back. As a result, they suffered heavy casualties and their numbers decreased rapidly. The two Sir Gods, Xin Jian and Giant Ape, did not expect Ji Tianqing to be so powerful. Ji Tianqing controlled the 10,000 swords with a flick of his finger and formed the heaven-destroying sword formation in a breath's time. This kind of method was also rarely seen even among middle-level divine lords. At the beginning, the two of them were exhausted from resisting the attacks of the 10,000 swords and were forced to panic and lose their composure. However, the two of them were experienced middle-level Sir Gods. Even if they were in a dangerous situation, they could quickly stabilize themselves. After 100 breaths of time, the two of them had already seen the pattern of the 10,000 swords movement. It became easier and more confident to resist the attacks of the 10,000 swords. The two of them finally resisted the power of the sword formation and had the time to protect the black-robed experts. The situation was in a temporary stalemate. Ji Ku and Bai Long's attacks were also neutralized by the two Sir Gods. At that moment, Ji Tianqing wielded the Sky Barrier Sword and cast a Sword Dao divine skill to attack the two Sir Gods, Xin Jian and Giant Ape. Heaven-splitting sword. The Burial of Heaven sword swung and released a 1,000-foot-long golden light. It carried the power to destroy everything and slashed at Sir God Giant Ape. The sword light was as bright as the sun and invisible sword essence surged for 1,000 miles. It made one's heart tremble and soul tremble in fear. Before the giant sword arrived, it had already locked onto Sir God Giant Ape's aura. Being in the heaven-destroying sword formation, he was already suppressed by the sword formation and his strength was reduced by 30%. Seeing the giant sword coming at him, it was too late for him to teleport away. He could only block it with all his might. Roar. Ape arm covers the sky. Sir God Giant Ape roared and raised his huge and thick arms to block in front of him. Golden light burst out of his body and condensed into a wall-like shield in front of his arms. Boom. The giant sword slashed the golden protective wall with a thunderous boom. The destructive power sent Sir God Giant Ape flying as blood spurted out of his 7 orifices. The golden light barrier also collapsed instantly, exploding into millions of golden light fragments that scattered in all directions. A dark golden storm erupted within the sword formation. There were more than a dozen black-clothed experts nearby. They were swept up by the dark golden storm on the spot, and their figures became blurry. 6 or 7 black-clothed experts were torn into pieces. Blood and flesh splattered all over the sky. The other 8 experts were lucky enough not to die, but they were also severely injured. Their severed limbs were wantonly thrown out. After this unexpected disaster, many black-clothed experts were filled with fear. Seeing that Mr. Kenshin was fighting with Ji Tianxing again, the surrounding black-clothed experts all retreated. Mr. Kenshin was indeed a grandmaster of the way of the sword. He used his divine thought to control the 12 dark red blood swords and attacked Ji Tianxing. The 12 blood-red divine swords contained a powerful soul-sucking power. They were like blood dragons that flashed with lightning. The blood swords flew back and forth, forming a dark red sword net that enveloped Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing used his divine thought to control the swords to block the blood sword's attack. Even though the sword flashes that filled the sky were illusory, Divine Lord Heartsword's bloodsword was a genuine divine weapon. But he was not at a disadvantage when facing the 12 blood swords with 100 swords. Even the soul-sucking power released by the bloodlight sword net did not have much of an effect on him. Apart from his divine soul being restrained and feeling a bit of pressure, there was no possibility of him going berserk or being distracted. After 2 breaths, Mr. Kenshin and Ji Tianxing exchanged 10 moves. He frowned fiercely, and his expression became incomparably solemn. He roared, "Damn little bastard! You are Tianxing. Your black sword, this sword formation, and your way of the sword can't be hidden from me." Before the battle, he only suspected that City Lord Shangning was fake. He didn't dare to be sure that this person was Tianxing. But now, Mr. Kenshin was 100% sure. This human youth in front of him was the mortal enemy of the Blood Sword sect, Tianxing. Ji Tianxing blocked Mr. Kenshin's attack while waving the Burial of Heaven toward the Divine Lord Giant Ape. He was actually able to fight against 2 with ease and was not at a disadvantage at all. Although, this was because he had the initiative. While Mr. Giant Ape and the Divine Lord Heartsword were unprepared, he directly used the heaven-destroying sword formation. But he had only used 80% of his strength. He had not used his full strength, nor had he used his trump card. The battle situation within the heaven-destroying sword formation changed again. Ji Tianxing restrained Mr. Giant Ape and the Divine Lord Heartsword, so the 2 could only attack with full strength. They had no time to protect the black-clothed experts. Meanwhile, Ji Ku, Bai Long, and Black Dragon were doing their best to kill the black-clothed experts. The 40-odd black-clothed experts who were lucky enough to survive were all heavily injured and dripping with blood. After being killed by the sword formation for so long, their divine power was rapidly weakened, and their battle strength was also greatly reduced. When they were attacked by Ji Ku and the others again, they were unable to resist and were forced to retreat. They had no choice but to flee for their lives. As screams rang out one after another, blood blossomed one after another. The 40-odd black-clothed experts' hearts became heavier and heavier, and they became more and more desperate. One expert after another, with grief, helplessness, and despair, died under the sword light and sword shadows. Unknowingly, another 100 breaths passed. Xin Jian and the Divine Lord Giant Ape were still besieging Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was unharmed, but their clothes were stained with blood, and their divine power was constantly weakening. As for the black-clothed experts, more than 90% of them had been killed. Only 8 experts were still alive, but they were also fleeing for their lives and had no battle strength left. These 8 experts were all direct disciples of the Bloodsword sect. Their strength had reached the 8th level of the Heaven God realm, and their sword techniques were outstanding. Even with the help of the heaven-destroying sword formation, Ji Ku and the others would need to spend some time and effort to kill them. At this moment, Ji Tianxing suddenly unleashed his full strength and used his trump card. Celestial Dragon Tyrant Body, he gave a low roar, and his body emitted a dazzling golden light. He instantly turned into a golden light giant that was 1,000 feet tall. The golden divine light illuminated the world, and the invisible divine power was intense and vast. Ji Tianxing was like a god of war descending from the sky, his aura oppressive and domineering to the extreme. He looked down at Xin Jian and the Divine Lord Giant Ape from above and shouted coldly in an indifferent tone, "A middle-level Divine Lord is nothing more than this. If that's all you have, then obediently accept your death." This was the first time he fought with Divine Lord experts after advancing to Divine Lord. Originally, he was still not too sure if he could kill Xin Jian and the Divine Lord Giant Ape with his first-level Divine Lord strength. These two middle-level Divine Lords, one was at the 5th level and the other was at the 6th level. Furthermore, they were both old monsters that had cultivated for 10,000 years. Their strength and foundation were extremely robust. But now, Ji Tianxing already had an answer. When he went all out, he was equivalent to a high-level Divine Lord. Chapter 2903. Ji Tianxing, a first-level Divine Monarch. When he unleashed his strongest power, he was actually comparable to a 7th-stage realm upper Divine Monarch. Such an outcome was truly world-shocking. Anyone in the divine world would find it unbelievable. Even Ji Tianxing himself found it unbelievable. But this was the truth. Because before he broke through to the Divine Monarch realm, he had strengthened himself to the limit of the Divine God realm. This was because he had laid the most solid foundation in the Divine God realm. In addition, he was the reincarnation of a Divine King and had the cultivation and battle experience of a Divine King. Once he entered the Divine Monarch realm, he could master all skills and communicate with heaven and earth. Moreover, he had merged with the 5 elements world and his power was endless. Under such circumstances, everything was as it should be. Damn it! He didn't use his full strength. How is this possible? He hadn't broken through to the Divine Monarch realm a month ago. Lord Kenshin looked up at Ji Tianxing, his eyes widened in shock and his body trembled. He was shocked, angry and at the same time, scared. He couldn't see through his opponent at all and couldn't imagine how many trump cards he had. Lord God Giant Ape's expression was ugly and cold sweat broke out on his back. He shook his head and said, "How could such a shocking expert appear in the small green mountain city? No wonder 5th Elder and 4th Elder were killed and the City Lord's manor was flattened by him. Such a monstrous Divine Lord powerhouse is also as rare as phoenix feathers and Chilean horns when looking across the entire Divine Kingdom." When he said this, Lord God Giant Ape had already admitted defeat in his heart. Ji Tianxing's mystery and his domineering aura had crushed Lord God Giant Ape. He admitted that he wasn't much stronger than 4th Elder. 4th Elder and Yuan Chengkong were killed by Ji Tianxing. Now, he was also injured by Ji Tianxing and trapped in the sword formation. Soon, he would follow in 4th Elder's footsteps. Thinking of this, Lord God Giant Ape quietly looked at Lord Kenshin and asked, "Left Guardian, the experts we brought are almost all dead. Can we still complete this mission? Why don't we preserve our strength and watch from the sidelines?" Lord God Giant Ape was as big as a mountain, but he wasn't stupid. Seeing that the situation was bad, he wanted to withdraw from the battle and watch from the sidelines. Anyway, it wasn't only Bloodsword Sect that wanted to kill Ji Tianxing, there was also Princess Tianfeng. As long as they spread the news, Princess Tianfeng's men would chase after Ji Tianxing and kill him in a frenzy. How could Lord Kenshin not understand Lord God Giant Ape's thoughts? However, as the left protector, he had come with a mission from the sect master. Before he set off, he had made a military order. He swore solemnly that he would take Ji Tianxing's head and return triumphantly. The sect master had high hopes for him and even rewarded him with a secret treasure. The right custodian and the other 3 elders were aware of the matter, and were secretly observing him. Once he completed the mission, not only would he have made a great contribution, but he would also be able to restore the reputation of the Bloodsword Sect and restore its prestige. And now, if he were to retreat with his tail between his legs, not only would he be ridiculed by the right guardian protector and the 3 elders, but he would also turn Bloodsword Sect into a laughingstock. One of the 6 great sects of Divine Kingdom couldn't even deal with a nameless consecrator. Once this news spread in the Divine Kingdom, the Bloodsword Sect's reputation would be swept to the ground, and their prestige would plummet. Even the backer of the Bloodsword Sect would lose face and be thoroughly disappointed, right? Thinking of this, Heartsword Divine Lord shook his head firmly. "Giant Ape, we have indeed underestimated this kid's strength and methods. However, we can't retreat. We can't afford to lose face like this." Lord God Giant Ape's face was bitter. He could only nod. However, he was cursing inwardly, "We can't even keep our lives. Why do we still care about face? Those bastards from the Bloodsword sect don't care about our lives at all. Every time they want to commit crimes, they use us as cannon fodder. Lord God Giant Ape wasn't a disciple of Bloodsword sect, but the leader of a second-rate force. The 90 black-clothed experts he had brought with him were the elites under his command. They were the cornerstones of his gang. It was because he had inadvertently offended the Bloodsword sect over 200 years ago, and had suffered the Bloodsword sect's crazy revenge. As a result, in order to survive and preserve the strength of his gang, he could only pledge his loyalty to Bloodsword sect. Over the past 200 years, he had worked hard for Bloodsword sect, doing the dirty work of killing people and plundering. Although he had obtained many benefits, the gang's manpower had dwindled day by day. Now, even the last 90 elites had been buried. He had practically become a general without an army. He wasn't that useful to Bloodsword sect anymore. He was secretly on guard. Could it be that Heartsword Divine Lord insisted on not retreating because he wanted him to be cannon fodder? Thinking of this, Lord God Giant Ape's mood became more and more irritable. Damn it. If not for the fear of Bloodsword sect's revenge, I would have turned around and left. Lord God Giant Ape frowned and cursed inwardly. At this time, Lord Kenshin took out an ancient black book from his interspatial ring. The book was as thick as a brick, but it was crudely damaged and had several holes. Even so, it still emitted an ice-cold black light and rippled with a mysterious and powerful aura. Lord Kenshin carefully held the damaged book and said with a solemn expression, "Giant Ape, this is an ancient divine item bestowed to me by the sect master, the Black Death Heavenly Book. Although it's damaged and its power is greatly reduced, it's still a supreme divine item. However, it was a monarch-level top-grade divine artifact after all. Even if it could only unleash 20% of its power, it could still kill a middle-level divine lord. Do your best to delay that brat. I will use this secret treasure to kill him in one fell swoop." As he spoke, Lord Kenshin formed a divine art with both hands, using a secret technique to activate his divine power and pour it into the Black Death Heavenly Book. Lord God Giant Ape's eyes lit up with a trace of hope. Black Death Heavenly Book? A supreme divine item? Good. Don't worry, Left Protector. I will protect you. Let's work together and defeat the enemy in one move. If he was bound to lose, of course he would have selfish motives and wanted to escape at the last moment. But if Lord Kenshin could turn the situation around, he was naturally willing to take the risk. If he succeeded, he would have made a great contribution and would be appreciated by the Bloodsword sect. He might even be able to use this contribution to become the 6th elder of the Bloodsword sect. That would be a great gain. Roar. Demonic Berserk Fist. Lord God Giant Ape roared as golden light blossomed from his body, condensing the image of a giant ape 3,000 meters tall behind him. The image of a giant ape with a majestic body and a ferocious aura was an ancient divine beast, the heaven-reaching ape. It had the power to pluck the stars and seize the moon. His eyes were crimson red, and like a mad demon, he threw 108,000 punches at Ji Tianxing. Ha ha ha, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. High up in the sky, Ji Tianxing sneered coldly as he looked at the golden fist radiance that covered the sky and covered the earth. Sword of Daytime. He formed a sword seal with both hands, forming a divine seal and thrusting it down at Lord God Giant Ape. Instantly, all the divine power within 100,000 miles was absorbed by him, condensing into a dazzling light as bright as the sun. The sacred golden light pierced through heaven and earth, space, and time, instantly passing through the 108,000 fists before exploding in front of Lord God Giant Ape. Boom. Chapter 2904. With a deafening explosion, the giant ape divine lord was drowned by the blazing divine light. It was as if a golden sun had exploded in front of his chest. In an instant, it expanded into a 10-mile mushroom cloud that soared into the sky. The power that could destroy heaven and earth destroyed his divine body without holding back. His god body was like ice and snow under the scorching sun. It melted quickly and disappeared without a trace. The only thing that could be preserved was his godhead. But it was also blasted into pieces, a dozen fragments that were carried away by the golden light and flew in all directions. The 5th level Divine Lord Giant Ape Divine Lord had fallen just like that. This result was within Ji Tianxing's expectations. After killing the Giant Ape Divine Lord in one move, he immediately turned to look at Heart Kenshin. He saw that Heart Kenshin had already retreated to the edge of the heaven-punishing sword formation, his back against the 5-colored wall of light. His eyes were tightly shut, and his body emitted a bloody light. His hands were forming seals as he activated the Black Death Heavenly Book with all his might. The cold, pitch-black ancient book floated in front of him, shining with a soul-stirring black light. The black light was expanding at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles. The ancient book had already been opened, and the tattered pages were flipping. Streaks of dark red and purple blood light flew out from the pages of the book and merged with the black light. The dark, cold light contained an endless aura of death. Bloody dragons that contained violent killing intent swam within the Black Death Heavenly Book. Death to those who seek life, life to the dead. Finally, Heart Kenshin's power erupted to the limit, activating the full power of the Black Death Heavenly Book. His tone was cold and emotionless as he naturally roared these words. As his voice sounded, the Black Death Heavenly Book moved out like a bottomless abyss, crushing toward Ji Tianxing. Whoosh! The Black Death Heavenly Book streaked across the sky, swallowing thousands of 5-colored sword lights along the way. Wherever it passed, all divine power, laws, and light were swallowed by the Black Death Heavenly Book. The mysterious Black Death Heavenly Book displayed its terrifying power. In fact, the power of the Black Death Heavenly Scripture was not limited to this. If not for the seal of the heaven-destroying sword formation, that ball of black death light with a radius of 100 miles would have swept through the heavens and earth without any hindrance. Wherever the Black Death divine light covered, mountains and rivers collapsed, all living beings withered, and even the divine power of heaven and earth was devoured. A city and millions of civilians would also be corroded into black ashes. When the Black Death divine light destroyed countless living beings, its size and power would rapidly increase, becoming even more unstoppable. Thus, the Black Death Heavenly Tome was a forbidden artifact in the primordial era. Once this thing appeared in the world, it would cause monstrous slaughter and create numerous purgatories of death. It was truly vicious and overbearing to the extreme. Even though Kenshin had used up too much of his divine power, his body was weak, and his face was as pale as paper. However, when he saw that the Black Death Heavenly Scripture was still so powerful, he felt very gratified. Damn you little bastard, you're dead now. Although the Black Death God Light will devour you until nothing is left. This monarch has no way to take your head and report to the sect master. However, if I can get rid of you and make you die in despair and fear, this monarch's mission will be completed. Kenshin thought silently, his eyes flashing with a cold, venomous light. Whoosh! In the next instant, the Black Death divine light swept across the 300 miles of sky and swallowed Ji Tianxing's figure. He also realized that he was in extreme danger, and a hint of fear flashed across his eyes. At this critical moment, he didn't have time to cast a spell to save himself. He only cared about saving Ji Ku, White Dragon, and Black Dragon. He used his fastest speed to put Ji Ku, White Dragon, and Black Dragon into the Divine Pagoda. Ji Ku and the others were safe, but he was drowned by the Black Death divine light. Whoosh! In an instant, his 300-meter-tall golden body was completely devoured by the Black Death divine light. Even his protective divine light couldn't resist the Black Death divine light at all and was directly devoured. Any defensive means were useless in front of the Black Death divine light. It seemed that Ji Tianxing couldn't resist and was about to be corroded into ashes by the Black Death divine light. Kenshin looked at this scene with a cold smile on his face. He was in an extremely good mood and felt very relieved. However, at this critical moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Ji Tianxing, who had returned to his original form, suddenly waved his hands and created a huge black vortex. Whoosh! That black vortex with a radius of 10 miles was also as black as ink, mysterious and cold. The vortex blocked in front of Ji Tianxing and released a terrifying devouring power, crazily devouring the Black Death divine light. Whoosh! The indestructible Black Death divine light couldn't show any power when it met the black vortex. It was like endless seawater crazily rushing into the vortex, unable to make any waves. In the blink of an eye, 30% of the Black Death divine light within 100 miles was devoured. 3 breaths later, the Black Death divine light was completely devoured, not leaving a single drop. Ji Tianxing's figure appeared once more, standing in the sky unscathed. He withdrew his hands with a satisfied expression and looked mockingly at Kenshin. His lips curled into a disdainful sneer. "Is that all you've got?" Divine Lord Heartsword was dumbfounded. They stared at Ji Tianxing with their mouths agape. Their hearts were filled with shock, and their emotions were in turmoil. What secret art did he use? How is this possible? Heartsword God roared in his heart. He was filled with indignation and anger. The Black Death Heavenly Book was the strongest divine item in his possession. It was also his only hope of turning defeat into victory and killing Ji Tianxing. But he never would have thought that the Black Death divine light would be so easily neutralized without being able to hurt Ji Tianxing at all. How could this be? Such a heavy blow caused Divine Lord Heartsword to lose his mind. His face turned paler and his aura turned chaotic. At this moment, Ji Tianxing teleported over with the Heavenpiercer sword in his hand and swung his sword. God Punisher. The dazzling 5-colored sword slashed toward Kenshin's head with the power of 40 kinds of laws. The pitilessly terrifying sword intent suppressed his mind, causing him to be terrified to the extreme. He was already weak. It was too late for him to use the Black Death Heavenly Book and release the Black Death Divine Light to block. At this moment of life and death, he instinctively used his divine sense to control the Black Death Heavenly Book to block above his head. Swish! The 2 palm-sized Black Death Heavenly Books instantly expanded to a radius of 30 meters. It was like a black light barrier that protected Heartsword Divine Lord. Boom! There was a thunderous explosion. The God Punisher sword slashed the Black Death Heavenly Book. Overflowing divine light burst out, mixed with black fragments that filled the sky. The Black Death Heavenly Book disappeared. It was torn to shreds by the giant sword, turning into thousands of pieces of black paper that burned in the 7-colored divine light and turned to ashes. Even though the Black Death Heavenly Book blocked the God Punisher sword, Kenshin wasn't injured. But when he saw the Black Death Heavenly Book being destroyed with his own eyes, his eyes widened. Endless grief and indignation surged in his heart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Fart! A bloody mist filled the sky. It was a ghastly sight. Chapter 2905. My Black Death Heavenly Book is gone just like that. Heart Kenshin's eyes were lifeless as he muttered in a daze. That was a top-grade monarch divine artifact that had been passed down since ancient times. It was also one of the top treasures of the Bloodsword sect. The sect master had just given it to him not long ago, and he had yet to completely refine it. He had yet to discover its full power. This was the first time he had used it. Not only had it not been effective, but it had also been destroyed by Ji Tianxing's sword. How could there be such a grievance? Where could he reason with? Heart Kenshin was devastated, and his heart was filled with sorrow and despair. At this moment, he suddenly felt some regret. If he had known that this Tianxing was so monstrous, he would not have taken the initiative to ask the sect master for help. This child's strength and methods were definitely not something a mid-level divine lord could match. Perhaps only the sect master himself could defeat him. While Heart Kenshin was in a daze, Ji Tianxing once again swung his sword. Burial of Heaven. Another full-power sword slash. The 3,000-meter-long 5-colored sword contained 46 types of law energy. It slashed toward Heart Kenshin's head. This time, without the Black Death Heavenly Book to block, Heart Kenshin was in despair. He could only ignite his god blood and unleash the last of his potential to release 18 blood-red swords. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 18 swords instantly formed a sword net that protected him. Boom. The heaven-burying sword carried supreme divine might as it slashed into the net of swords. A thunderous boom erupted and shook the universe. Amidst the loud noise, the blood-red sword net was torn to shreds, and dark red fragments scattered in all directions. Heart Kenshin was sent flying, and a 2-foot-long gully appeared on his chest. Blood gushed out. Just a little bit more and he would have been split into 2 halves by this sword. After flying for 100 miles in the sky, he finally fell into the sword formation. After suffering such a heavy injury, he twitched in pain, blood spurting out of his nose and mouth. Before he could regain his composure, Ji Tianxing teleported over and slashed down with his sword. Rising sword. It was as if the sword had come from beyond the heavens, carrying with it a pitilessly elegant sword will, and it easily shattered Lord Kenshin's heart. The sword light was like a thunderbolt breaking through the sky, flashing and disappearing in a flash. Heart Kenshin Kuan's body also disintegrated, blood and flesh splattering everywhere. A diamond-shaped godhead covered in cracks flew out from the bloody mist. Ji Tianxing waited patiently for the rabbit. With a wave of his hand, he caught the rabbit. He clasped his palms together and unleashed an incomparably terrifying power, crushing the godhead into pieces. Catcher catcher with a crisp shattering sound, Heart Kenshin Kuan died. The battle was over. Ji Tianxing put away the quintessence fragment and began to clean up the battlefield. Everything within a radius of 500 miles was covered by the sword formation. 100 black-clothed experts, the giant ape Kazuko Kenshin Kuan had all died in this area. The five-colored divine light in the sky gradually dissipated, and the ground below had already turned into ruins. The skeletons and godhead fragments of the giant ape and the 100 experts were scattered among the ruins. Although the ruins were messy and the small godhead fragments were mostly buried by the ruins, they were very difficult to find. However, those godhead fragments all contained abundant divine power and the power of laws. Falling into the ruins, they were very conspicuous like fireflies in the dark night. Ji Tianxing spread out his divine sense, covering 500 miles of the ruins, and quickly found those godhead fragments. 100 breaths later, he found over 1,000 godhead fragments and put them all into his space ring. Although he had already reached the divine lord realm, devouring those godhead fragments wouldn't increase his strength by much. However, what he needed the most was the various laws contained within those godhead fragments. After doing all this, Ji Tianxing was about to cast a spell to remove the heaven-destroying sword formation. However, his consciousness suddenly detected a powerful divine power approaching from the north at an extremely fast speed. He raised an eyebrow and released his divine sense to investigate the situation in the north. Then, he saw a divine ship speeding towards him in the sky 5,000 miles to the north. The pitch-black divine ship didn't have any insignia or markings. However, Ji Tianxing immediately recognized it. It was the divine ship from before, the experts under the command of Princess Tianfeng. Haha, these fellows aren't stupid. Even though the blood sword sect has shaken them off, they still stubbornly chased after me. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a sneer, a playful expression on his face. Since you insist on sending yourselves to death, I'll fulfill your wish. An idea appeared in his mind, and the playful expression on his face became even more pronounced. Thus, he didn't remove the heaven-destroying sword formation. Instead, he urged the sword formation to operate faster. Within the sword formation, tens of thousands of giant swords were condensed, releasing resplendent divine light as they crisscrossed and intertwined. The sword formation, which had just calmed down, was once again filled with intense sword light. Ji Tianxing took off his hair bun and messed up his hair. He passed through the five-colored light wall of the sword formation and hurriedly flew into the sky, looking like he was fleeing. At the same time, the black divine ship was only 300 miles away from the heaven-destroying sword formation. Within the divine ship's cockpit, two black-armored divine sovereigns wearing black iron masks were looking at the sword formation with shining eyes. 20,000 miles away, I can sense the surging divine power here. There are experts fighting a great battle here. As I expected, this is the place. I've finally found them. Kai Liuxing, you guessed right. The blood sword sect's people have chased after them and intercepted the city lord of tranquility. The two sides are currently engaged in an intense battle. Look, they've even used the sword formation. You can imagine how intense the battle is. Haha, I'm certain that the city lord of tranquility's identity has already been exposed by the blood sword sect. We've come at the right time. They're in the midst of a fierce battle. We have a chance to pick up some scraps. Despot and Kai Liuxing discussed in low voices, their voices filled with complacency and anticipation. At that moment, the two of them suddenly saw a flash of light from the sword formation in front of them. Then, a human youth in a white robe and covered in blood escaped from the sword formation. Perhaps because he was terrified, he flew over in a panic, as if he was fleeing for his life. This human youth's hair was disheveled, and his face was covered in blood. He seemed to be in a sorry state with his injuries. However, Despot and Kai Liuxing instantly recognized him. He was the city lord of tranquility. Their eyes immediately lit up, and they looked at each other with complacent sneers. Ha ha ha, Kai Liuxing, your foresight is truly divine. That brat was surrounded by the Bloodsword sect and was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He barely managed to escape the sword formation. Now, we can finally pick up some scraps. Yes. No matter how crafty the Bloodsword sect is, how could they hide from my divine foresight? As for that brat, he can only blame himself for being too unlucky to have delivered himself to our doorstep. As they spoke, the two of them no longer dared to waste any more time and flew out of the divine ship. Swish, swish. In the next instant, the two of them appeared high in the sky, holding a saber and a sword. They had sinister smiles on their faces as they faced Ji Tianxing. Little bastard, this is called not taking the path to heaven, but barging into hell instead. At this point, you still have the extravagant hope of escaping. Obediently kneel down and accept your death. Chapter 2906. Despots and Kai Liuxing's voices exploded in the sky. Ji Tianxing, who was running for his life, only looked back at the sword array, as if he was afraid that someone would chase after him. He didn't even look at the sky in front of him, as if he didn't notice the arrival of the divine warship. He was shocked when he suddenly heard the voices of the two divine emperors. He quickly turned his head to the north. He was obviously stunned when he saw the two divine emperors in black armor and the divine warship. His face was covered by his long hair and his expression couldn't be seen. But Despot and Kai Liuxing could imagine that his expression must be very interesting. Ha ha ha. That guy must be scared out of his wits. He just escaped from the tiger's den and now he's in the wolf's den. He must be desperate. Similar thoughts flashed through their minds at the same time. Ji Tianxing seemed to come back to his senses and quickly turned around and flew to the west. Little B****, where are you going? You'll definitely die today. Don't make any more pointless struggles. Despot and Kai Liuxing shouted proudly. They waved their swords and started to chase after him. The black godly warship also charged towards Ji Tianxing like a bolt of lightning at its fastest speed. At that moment, Despot and Kai Liuxing were full of excitement and anticipation. They could even imagine the scene of Ji Tianxing's body being dismembered. Not only the two divine emperors, but also the 100 black-armored experts in the divine warship felt that victory was in their hands. Everyone thought that as long as they caught up with Ji Tianxing, they could easily capture and kill him. There wouldn't be any difficulty and there wouldn't be any accidents. However, no one expected that disaster would befall the next moment. Despot, Kai Liuxing and the divine warship quickly caught up with Ji Tianxing, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death. When they were 10 miles away, Ji Tianxing suddenly turned around and raised his palms, shooting out endless black light. Swoosh, swoosh. The two pitch-black, ice-cold black lights of death instantly spread out to a radius of 100 miles, enveloping the entire area. Despot, Kai Liuxing and the entire divine warship were drowned by the black lights of death. Even now, everyone was still smiling coldly and full of confidence. In their eyes, this was just Ji Tianxing's final struggle, and it didn't have much power. However, the black armor worn by Despot and Kai Liuxing was instantly corroded by the black light of death and turned into ashes. The black divine warship had also been corroded to the point where it was riddled with holes. Only then did everyone realize that something was wrong, and they all let out roars of fear and unease. Be careful. There's something strange about this black light. Retreat. However, everyone was drowned by the black light of death. Within a radius of 100 miles, it was a world of black light. Even if they wanted to retreat, how could they possibly retreat? Kai, along with a series of soft noises, Despot and Kai Liuxing's bodies were corroded with countless holes. Even their limbs were gone. The black divine warship completely collapsed, and black ash filled the sky. The hundreds of black-armored experts in the divine warship only struggled for 2 breaths of time before they were reduced to ashes. Everyone's bodies were destroyed. Only the 5 colored divine sparks were left, and they fell into the black light. Even though the divine sparks were stronger than the body. But they only had the strength of a celestial god. How could they resist the power of the Black Death divine light? That's right. That black light that blotted out the sky was the Black Death divine light released by the Black Death Sutra. Previously, Ji Tianxing used the power of the heaven-mending pearl to cast the devouring divine ability and devoured the Black Death divine light within a radius of 100 miles. That power was too strong, and also too vicious and overbearing. Ji Tianxing didn't have time to refine it at that time, so he stored it in the heaven-mending pearl. He originally planned to find time to refine it after the battle ended. But he didn't expect that Despot, Kai Liuxing, and the others would catch up right after the battle ended. Therefore, he came up with a plan to use the Black Death divine light to deal with everyone. Along with the cracking sounds that kept ringing out, everyone's divine sparks also cracked one after another, quickly decaying into dust. In a short span of 3 breaths, the 100 black-armored experts were all dead. Not even divine sparks were left behind. Only Despot and Kai Liuxing were still alive, but they were also seriously injured and extremely weak. Their divine bodies were still being eroded and weathered. After their limbs disappeared, their torsos and heads also turned into black ash and quickly disappeared. Finally, 10 breaths of time passed. The Black Death divine light that blotted out the sky finally exhausted its power and gradually dissipated. The heaven and earth within a radius of a few hundred miles had become a barren land, like a dark and grey desert. Despot and Kai Liuxing's bodies were completely destroyed, leaving only their divine sparks that were full of cracks. After suffering such serious injuries, their strength had decreased greatly, and they were already arrows at the end of their flight. At this time, Ji Tianxing's voice came from not far away. "Oh, I didn't expect the 2 of you to be so tenacious. You actually didn't die in the Black Death divine light?" Obviously, Ji Tianxing didn't expect Despot and Kai Liuxing to still be alive. Despot and Kai Liuxing heard the voice and looked back at the same time. They saw Ji Tianxing, whose white robe was stained with blood and whose hair was disheveled, standing calmly in the sky. At close range, Despot and Kai Liuxing discovered that he wasn't injured at all, and his aura was still unfathomable. There was a faint sneer on his handsome face, and his eyes were still as deep and vast as before. He didn't look injured at all. Despot and Kai Liuxing immediately reacted and roared in their hearts. "We've been tricked. He's tricking us. He's not injured at all." Despot and Kai Liuxing couldn't believe and accept this result. They didn't have time to think about it. Ji Tianxing had fought with the people of the Bloodsword sect. How could he be unharmed? They only had one thought at this time. Run. Whoosh. Whoosh. 2 5-colored divine sparks streaked across the sky, flying to the east and west respectively. They were very smart. If they ran separately, at least one of them would survive. Unfortunately, they still underestimated Ji Tianxing's strength. Seal. Ji Tianxing didn't move from his spot. He only raised his palms and shouted coldly. Instantly, the space within 100 miles froze. The 2 divine sparks froze in the sky as if they were frozen. They couldn't escape, nor could they move. After reaching the Divine Lord realm, Ji Tianxing's control of the law of space had reached an even more exquisite level. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing shot out 2 golden lights that wrapped around the 2 divine sparks and pulled them back to him. He grabbed one of the divine sparks with each hand and captured Despot and Kai Liuxing. "You 2 must be very curious about who I am." Ji Tianxing looked at the 2 divine sparks and said with a smile, "To tell you the truth, this lord is Tianxing, a consecrator of the Qi family." Hearing this, the 2 divine sparks trembled. Clearly, they were very emotional. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Are you still confused? Aren't the people of the Bloodsword sect blocking this monarch's path and fighting with this monarch? Why didn't the people of the Bloodsword sect appear and rush out of the sword formation to kill me?" As he spoke, he removed the heaven-vanquishing sword formation. There was nothing in the sky within a radius of 500 miles. Just before you arrived, this lord killed them all. The two divine sparks trembled again in extreme fear. Chapter 2907. The answer was already revealed. But Despot and Kai Liuxing were shocked until they were speechless, as if they were petrified. Even though they had long been mentally prepared and guessed that City Lord Shangning was Tianxing. They also knew that it was Tianxing who killed Yuan Chengkong and the two reverends. This Reverend Tianxing's strength and methods were very powerful and could not be underestimated. But Despot and Kai Liuxing were even clearer on how powerful Bloodsword sect's Left Protector and Giant Ape Divine Lord were. These two powerhouses joining hands was enough to match a 7th stage realm high-ranking Divine Lord. In their view, if Ji Tianxing could escape Bloodsword sect's encirclement, it would be very impressive. But the final result was simply too horrifying. Bloodsword sect's 100 experts, including the Left Protector and Giant Ape, were all killed off by Ji Tianxing. Furthermore, it was even in a short 15-minute. This was simply too preposterous. Despot and Kai Liuxing's 3 views and understanding were overturned. The two of them were immersed in incomparable shock and were unable to recover for a long time. At this time, Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "You guys must have thought that this lord concealed his strength previously. This lord is actually a high-ranking divine lord." Despot and Kai Liuxing did not follow up, tacitly agreeing with this view. That was the only reason that made sense. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianxing said with a ruminating smile, "But unfortunately, you guys guessed wrong again. This lord just broke through to the Divine Lord realm not long ago and is now a 1st-level Divine Lord realm." Despot and Kai Liuxing were stunned once again. The two divine sparks did not move at all, as if they had lost the ability to think and move. One shocking secret after another popped out of Ji Tianxing's mouth, directly shocking the two of them silly. Their consciousness fell into a blank, crashing. At this time, Ji Tianxing sighed again and said, "Sigh. You guys know too many secrets. You must die." Despot and Kai Liuxing finally recovered the ability to think, but they were speechless. Damn it. We were puzzled and secretly guessed these questions. But we didn't ask you. These secrets, it was you who wanted to reveal them, all right? You actually despise us for knowing too much and want to kill us to silence us? Can you be any more shameless? Despot and Kai Liuxing's consciousness were filled with such thoughts. They were filled with grief and indignation. However, this was no longer important. Ji Tianxing clenched his fists and pressed them down twice as if they were light. Crack, crack. Despot and Kai Liuxing's godheads were instantly crushed. 2 middle-level divine lords were crushed to death by Ji Tianxing just like this. Before he died, Kai Liuxing only had one thought in his mind. F***CK. If I had known that this brat was so heaven-defying, I wouldn't have tried to be smart and sent myself to a dead end. However, in Despot's consciousness, there was a different thought, and it was filled with resentment. Kai Liuxing, this idiot, thought that he was extremely smart, but in the end, he got us all killed. If I had known earlier, I would have been even more stupid. If I hadn't followed the Bloodsword sect here, nothing would have happened. Unfortunately, these two fellow sufferers no longer had the chance to communicate. If there was a netherworld in this world, the two of them would probably have a big fight on their way to the Yellow Springs. A moment later, Ji Tianxing left the ruins and continued on his way. He then summoned the Black Dragon as his mount and had the White Dragon accompany him to protect him. Black Dragon flew across the sky at lightning speed, heading straight for the south. White Dragon stood on the dragon's back, using divine sense to investigate the surrounding situation, maintaining vigilance at all times. Ji Tianxing sat cross-legged in meditation, holding over 10 godhead fragments in his hands, silently refining them. Relying on the Devour divine ability, he quickly refined the god power within the fragments, stripping away the divine Tao laws within. As time passed, his strength continued to accumulate and increase. The number of divine Tao laws he grasped was also rapidly increasing. One day later, his strength reached the critical point and was about to break through to the 2nd stage realm. The number of divine Tao laws he grasped had also reached 84. At this time, Black Dragon had already left Green Mountain City and entered the borders of Wind Night City. Continuing to fly south, He still had to pass through 4 cities before he could enter Heavenly Wind City. As for Heavenly Snow City, it was even further south. With Black Dragon's flying speed, it would take at least 10 days to reach. Late at night. The night sky was cold. Cold winds howled high up in the sky. A waning moon hung in the sky. The stars that filled the sky were faintly discernible under the cover of the clouds. At this time, Ji Tianxing finally broke through the bottleneck after 12 attempts and hard work. Swoosh! Following his entire body radiating with resplendent golden light, a sacred and dignified aura burst forth. He finally broke through to the second-level Divine Lord realm. Vigorous and vast divine power surged and rose within his body, stirring up the sound of rolling thunder. His outer appearance did not change, but his strength increased around 6 times, his foundation even deeper. Huff, Ji Tianxing revolved and regulated his breathing for an hour before ending cultivation, letting out a long breath of turbid air. At this time, White Dragon, who was quietly waiting by the side, hurriedly bowed and said with a look of joy, "Congratulations to Master for breaking through again, successfully recovering to the second-level Divine Lord realm." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a gentle expression, "Currently, I'm still a low-rank Divine Lord. Breaking through realms is relatively simple and still very smooth. When I become a high-rank Divine Lord in the future, it will be very difficult to break through again." But White Dragon did not believe it and said expectantly, "Master's current talent and strength foundation are more than 10 times better than back then. Not to mention recovering to a high-rank Divine Lord, even recovering to the Divine King realm is still easy and simple. In this disciple's view, at most in another dozen years, you will be able to return to the Divine King realm and explore the entire boundless heaven continent." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and did not continue this topic. "In this day, did you discover anything unusual?" White Dragon's mouth curled into a smile and said in a playful tone, "In the previous battle, Master killed everyone. At that time, the commotion of the battle was too great, and we were secretly monitored. Therefore, the news will spread very quickly. Blood Sword Sect and Princess Qianfeng's people should have received the news long ago. In this day, when we passed by the vicinity of Windy Night City, several groups of people secretly followed and investigated. Apart from them, no one dared to approach, let alone attack us." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood and analyzed calmly. In the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom, high-rank Divine Lords are the top experts. Only the masters of the 6 major sects, the monarch, the 2 dukes, and the royal family's consecrators have such strength. Those top experts are proud of their status and will not act rashly. Therefore, the strongest people that Bloodsword Sect and Princess Qianfeng can mobilize are only 6th rank and 5th rank Divine Lords. I killed all of them yesterday, so Bloodsword Sect and Princess Qianfeng must be shocked. They realized that my strength is far beyond their expectations and will not act rashly. Otherwise, they will send a few more Divine Lords to their deaths. I think that they should be discussing countermeasures, mobilizing people, and scheming something. The next time they act, it will be a thunderous blow and they will use all their strength." Chapter 2908. Ji Tianxing had already expected the actions of the Bloodsword Sect and Princess Qianfeng. It wasn't hard to figure out what they were thinking from their point of view. Even though he knew that an even more dangerous situation was coming, he was fearless. However, he was fearless, and he was confident that he could turn the situation around. Black Dragon continued on his way while he continued to refine the Godhead fragments to increase his strength and condense more laws. Late at night, Tianfeng Province City, which had a radius of 150 kilometers, was sleeping peacefully under the night sky. This ancient city with 10,000 years of history was located in the Tianbei wasteland. The surrounding tens of thousands of kilometers was a wasteland without any mountains or forests. Thus, the northern wind from the setting sun ocean swept across the wasteland, causing sand and stones to fly. Even though this city looked somewhat desolate, in reality, the area around Tianfeng Province City was rich in metal ores. In addition, this main city was located in the middle of a dozen cities, so its geographical position was very important. Thus, when the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom was established 10,000 years ago, this city was designated as a county city to manage the 16 surrounding cities. Many experts, powerful factions, and merchant associations were stationed in Tianfeng Province City and spread to the surrounding cities. The city was very prosperous, with tall buildings and rows upon rows of houses. More than 4 million people lived in this county city. Located in the northern city district, the luxurious Princess Manor was still brightly lit. The guards and attendants in the manor were as relaxed and carefree as usual. From the inside to the outside, they exuded the noble and calm bearing of a 1,000-year-old clan. After all, the owner of this manor was one of the 36 princesses of the Divine Kingdom, the noble Count Chishan. Not to mention Tianfeng Province City, even in the surrounding cities, no one dared to be disrespectful to him. Even though many people had heard a rumor. A traitor had appeared in Qingshan City, a small coastal city in the north, and had dared to kill the Qingshan City Lord. The Qingshan City Lord had a close relationship with Count Chishan. Count Chishan was furious and swore to kill the traitor to avenge the Qingshan City Lord. But in the eyes of others, such a small matter wasn't worth worrying about. As long as Count Chishan gave the order, the traitor would die without a doubt. In the surrounding 50 million kilometers, no one dared to go against Count Chishan. At this moment, in the princess's study, 4 guards were guarding the door, and the door to the study was tightly shut. The room was dimly lit and quiet. A white-haired old man in a purple robe and a black cloak was leaning against a large wooden armchair. The old man was tall and sturdy, and his spirit was hale and hearty. His dignified square face was filled with the vicissitudes of life. His sunken eyes flickered with a cold light, deep and sharp. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the dark night outside the window. He was waiting and thinking. His right hand rested on the armrest of the chair, and his knuckles tapped lightly on the armrest, making a rhythmic sound. This white-haired elder was the leader of the Tianfeng Prefecture, the Tianfeng Prefecture Princess, Count Chishan. Even though Earl Chishan's expression was calm and his eyes were cold. However, the small subconscious movements of his right hand betrayed his inner state. Worry and anxiety. 20 hours ago. The 3 groups of spies under his command all returned with news one after another. He Ba, Kai Liuxing, and the hundreds of elite experts had all died in Wind Night City. Apart from that, the experts of Bloodsword sect had also been killed. When he first received this news, Count Chishan was dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. He couldn't imagine that a small Qi family consecrator would have such terrifying means. Perhaps only a high divine lord would have such power. But why would a high divine lord with a noble status lower himself to be a consecrator of Azure Mountain City's Qi family? Count Chishan couldn't understand. However, the 3 groups of spies reported the same result, and he had to accept this fact. Thus, he calmly thought for a long time. He Ba and Kai Liuxing had both failed, so who else could kill that kid? He had more than 10 low divine lords under his command, and more than 800 elite experts. However, sending low divine lords to kill Tianxing was useless. Ordinary heavenly god experts were useless no matter how many of them there were. He could only send mid-divine lords to carry out the mission. However, He Ba and Kai Liuxing were dead, and he could only mobilize 3 mid-divine lords. Including himself, that was only 4 people. Even so, he still felt that it wasn't safe and that he had no chance of success. After all, Tianxing had not only killed He Ba and Kai Liuxing, but also the experts of Bloodsword sect. According to the reports of his spies, the leader of Bloodsword sect this time was the noble Left Protector. This made Count Chishan suspect that even if he personally led 3 mid-divine lords to kill Tianxing, he might not be able to return. Could it be that he could only admit defeat and give up on taking revenge on Tianxing? This thought had once appeared in Count Chishan's mind. However, he quickly rejected this idea. Because he couldn't afford to lose, and he couldn't afford to lose face. A dignified county lord actually couldn't do anything to a nobody. 2 of his generals had been killed, but he could only swallow his anger and not dare to take revenge. Once this news spread, his dignity as a county lord would be trampled underfoot. Moreover, He Ba and Kai Liuxing were only his vanguards. Even if these 2 generals died, he could still mobilize stronger forces. For example, the 5 aristocratic families in Tianfeng province all had Sir God realm experts. At this critical moment, as long as Count Chishan asked, the 5 aristocratic families would be willing to help. In any case, everyone had a tacit understanding. After the matter was settled, Count Chishan would make some concessions and give the 5 aristocratic families some benefits. For example, the Cheng family had always wanted the South Wind Canyon, and the Du family had always been thinking about the Cloud Cup pool. The Shong family had sent many gifts, hoping to reduce the annual tax of 80 million. As for the Nangong family, they wanted to occupy a street in South City and transform it into a smithing workshop. Thinking of this, Count Chishan was full of energy and fighting spirit. Ha ha ha. A nameless nobody with no background wants to fight with this seat. Do you think that this kind of battle depends on strength? It's a battle of status and power. The entire Tianfeng city belongs to me, so don't even think about leaving my territory alive. Count Chishan muttered to himself, his body emitting a domineering aura as a sinister light flashed in his eyes. Swoosh. He finally made up his mind and said in a dignified tone, Huanyu, go and inform the family heads of the 5 aristocratic families to come to the county lord's residence immediately. I have something to discuss with them. Originally, there was no one else in the study room other than him. However, as he finished speaking, a hoarse and deep voice sounded from the corner of the study room. County Lord, have you made up your mind? Huan Yu, who was hiding in the dark, was Count Chishan's trusted aide. He knew very well that Count Chishan and the 5 aristocratic families had always been in a competition. Since Count Chishan had asked the 5 aristocratic families for help, he had to make some sacrifices and concessions. Chapter 2909. Princess, you have been competing with the 5 aristocratic families for so many years. It took you more than 200 years to suppress the 5 aristocratic families and maintain the balance. Once you speak up tonight, the 5 aristocratic families will be even more powerful in the future. By then, it will be very difficult for you to suppress them and maintain the balance. Huan Yu was Count Chishan's right-hand man and also one of his brains. He did not want to see Count Chishan bow to the 5 aristocratic families in order to deal with Tianxing and destroy the balance in the county. Why don't you do it yourself? We will gather 4 middle-level godly lords, 8 low-level godly lords, and 500 elite experts. With such a powerful force, we will definitely be able to kill Tianxing and tear him into pieces. Huan Yu tried to persuade Count Chishan with a firm and confident tone. However, Count Chishan shook his head and said, we have already failed once. That kid will definitely be on his guard and will not fall for it again. This time, we have to gather the strongest forces to kill that kid in one fell swoop. Only then can we avoid future troubles. Of course, I will do it myself. However, quality does not matter. I have to borrow the strength of the 5 aristocratic families. As for the godly lords under me, they have to preserve their strength. Otherwise, how can we keep the 5 aristocratic families in check in the future? It was obvious that Count Chishan had already considered the consequences. In fact, he even predicted that there would be heavy casualties in this assassination attempt. He would rather use this opportunity to exhaust the 5 aristocratic families' strength than let his godly lords die in battle. Huan Yu guessed his thoughts and did not try to persuade him anymore. He only said worriedly, Princess, if you use this opportunity to weaken the 5 aristocratic families' strength, they will definitely be on guard. If they react passively and push the blame to each other, won't it affect the overall situation? Count Chishan said coldly, if I don't go personally, those cunning bastards will definitely have their own plans. Therefore, I will personally lead the team. You will stay in the princess's residence. Huan Yu was silent for a while before he said, the princess's residence is very safe. Nothing will happen. I will go with you. It will be safer. Count Chishan did not comment and did not reject him. Then, Huan Yu disappeared into the darkness and drifted away. Count Chishan also got up and walked out of the study. He entered a secret underground room and waited for the 5 aristocratic families' family heads to arrive. Time passed quickly. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The Black Dragon traveled continuously for 3 days and 3 nights before finally entering the North Heaven wasteland. After flying for another 50,000 miles, they would pass by the Tianfeng County. At this moment, night had already fallen. The black dragon gradually slowed down its flying speed and cautiously surveyed its surroundings. Ji Tianxing also ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. Through these 3 days of cultivation, his divine Tao foundation was already stable. He refined many more law fragments and condensed more than a dozen laws. Presently, the divine Tao laws he'd grasped had reached 100. Teacher, we have arrived at the northern wasteland. Tianfeng City is just 50,000 miles away. Do we need to make a detour? At this time, the white dragon bowed to Ji Tianxing and reported the current position to him. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said calmly, "Why should I avoid it? If Princess Tianfeng wanted to kill me, no matter how hard I tried to avoid her, she would still come after me." If he had been intimidated, he had already given up on the idea of revenge. Even if I flew over the Tianfeng County, she wouldn't dare to attack me. The white dragon nodded and said, "I understand. Teacher, you don't want to waste time. You just want to cut the Gordian knot and end this quickly." Ji Tianxing nodded and didn't say anything. The white dragon reported again, "Originally, I also thought that after you killed those black-armored experts and destroyed the divine warship, Princess Tianfeng would retreat. Unfortunately, not only did she not give up on the idea of revenge, she even sent out 3 times the number of spies and scouts. In these 3 days, there were at least 30 groups of spies secretly spying on us. There were even a few groups of spies who didn't know what was good for them and followed us all the way. Since I had nothing to do, I took the time to kill 2 groups of spies. The rest of the spies saw that the situation was not good and retreated further away." Ji Tianxing frowned and sneered, "That's the princess of a county, the earl of a divine kingdom, one of the 36 feudal officials of the Bloodflame divine kingdom with great power. I only killed 2 Sir Gods under his command and killed over 100 experts, that's all. If she is so scared that she doesn't dare to take revenge, how can she continue to be a princess?" The white dragon also sneered and nodded, "Teacher, you are right." Ji Tianxing stood up and looked ahead at the seemingly calm wilderness under the night sky. "If I am not wrong, Princess Tianfeng has already used her strongest force to set up an ambush in the wilderness not far from here. These 3 days are enough for them to set up a few monarch-level divine arrays and mobilize thousands of experts." The white dragon raised his eyebrows and asked, "Teacher, since you are so confident, are we going to crush them directly?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, "Confidence doesn't mean arrogance. We still don't know how many people they have. If he barged in recklessly, wouldn't he be asking for trouble? Even if we win in the end, the process will be more difficult." The white dragon asked with interest, "Then what do you mean?" Ji Tianxing revealed a wisp of a meaningful smile and said, "When I refined those quintessence fragments earlier, I obtained a type of mirror image law. This law is very special. It can imitate any target 100% and there are almost no flaws. Although it is only a god-level law, it is not very powerful. But if we use it well, we will be able to achieve unexpected results." The white dragon suddenly understood and said with anticipation, "I understand. Teacher, are you going to show them a scene of killing each other as an appetizer for the big battle?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Okay, you and the black dragon go into the divine pagoda and rest." After that, he put the white dragon and the black dragon into the divine pagoda. He was alone, hiding in the darkness and flying forward silently. At the same time, 20,000 miles behind him, a few experts who were secretly following him suddenly lost track of the black dragon's aura. The experts were stunned for a moment and quickly used their divine skills to search for the black dragon, the white dragon and Ji Tianxing. However, they could not find any trace of them at all. Ji Tianxing, the white dragon and the black dragon seemed to have disappeared into thin air. How could 2 living people and a black dragon suddenly disappear? The experts were shocked and quickly took out their communication jade slips to report the news to Princess Tianfeng. At this moment, Princess Tianfeng and Huanyu were lying in ambush in the wilderness, patiently waiting for Ji Tianxing to walk into their trap.